An unidentified man gestures to a young man with blonde and long hair. He calls him a number, 11542, which is this guy's name. The girl looks awkwardly at the guy, whose face the man who introduced him asked her to pay attention to. The man says that this young man is now their slave. He will serve them and live with them from now on. The girl's expression takes on a look of sincere surprise. In her thoughts, she shouts out his title and name, Lord Edwin. The girl covers her mouth with her hands in shock, looking directly into the face of their new family slave, in whom she suddenly recognized a familiar lord. The lord she tried so hard to forget, but whom she still continued to see in her dreams every night. Recalling the events of 2 years ago, there was a castle under a sky covered with stars, from which music was coming. A young girl, who was mentally bored in the place where she found herself, went out onto its balcony. At some point, the night sky caught her attention. Looking up, she mentally says that this sky is as beautiful as Filiosa's. She reaches out to the brightest star in the sky, thinking that there are only 15 days left. She needs to stay here for another 15 days. 4 months have passed since she arrived in Levante. Her home is in Filiosa, a town so small that it is not even marked on maps. The protagonist is the daughter of the Mackenzie family, who are the only aristocrats in town. She describes her growing up as a freedom that is independent of the rules of etiquette. She is also not used to striving for neatness. She stands innocently, while her boots are smeared in street mud, which has also smeared on the floor nearby. The protagonist, Arietta, is scolded by her mother for getting her dress dirty in the ground once again. She reminds the girl that she has only a year before her debut, and she keeps acting like a shrew. Because of their daughter's unacceptable behavior, they send her to her Aunt Lillian in Levant. Arietta greets her aunt, saying that she is pleased to meet her. The girl is visibly nervous because of her relative's stern look. She is worried because she doesn't know if they will get along with a woman she has never met before. But fortunately, a friendly smile appears on the woman's face, and she replies to her niece that she is also glad to finally meet her. The girl calms down, realizing that the aunt is very kind and obviously sincerely happy to see them. The auntie pushes the heroine to the house, not allowing her to say anything else, but only asking her questions. Is she tired or hungry during the long trip? At first, the heroine did not understand the reason for this kindness, but then she realized that her aunt simply likes to take her niece to various events, looking for a future husband. When she sees her niece, her aunt asks her where she disappeared to, and notes that she has been looking for her everywhere. Sometimes Arietta just wanted to say something, but didn't have time. The aunt took her hand, saying that they would talk later, but now the girl had to follow her. Arietta has no choice but to agree. The aunt says she wants to introduce the heroine to someone. Having approached the right people, her aunt introduces Arietta to a couple of people. She introduces her to Countess Welch and her eldest son, Derek. The guy says hello, calling himself Derek Welch. The heroine bows politely, holding the skirt of her dress, and is already saying her name in response. With a smile on his face, Derek says that he has heard that the girl is from Philios, and then asks how she is doing in Levant. Arietta replies that her aunt takes excellent care of her, never giving her a chance to feel uncomfortable. Mentally, she notes that her relative has already dragged her to a dozen events like this one. Derek replies that it's very nice of her, and then recalls that he's heard that Arietta has a great voice. The girl says she has nothing to brag about here because she sings the way she feels is right. Derek is slightly surprised, and then asks if this is because the girl did not receive a proper education. This makes the heroine upset. In her mind, she realizes that she is now in a familiar situation again. Although the young men behave politely, you can always see the disappointment on their faces at this moment, just like now. The heroine wonders if this is all because he thought Arietta was older than she was, or perhaps she simply did not meet his expectations. This all makes the girl really upset. She even notes that she would have left this place a long time ago if it weren't for her aunt and mother, who are standing not far away, to the side of the two of them. Obviously, they would not have let her do it. Arietta realizes that she has lived a wild rural life, which will obviously not allow her to gain the recognition of aristocrats so easily. She sighs, and decides that she has to come up with some excuse to get away from Lord Welch. The heroine apologizes and then says that she is quite tired, but before she can say that she would like to leave, Derek turns his head to the side at something that has caught his attention. Not only the young lord was distracted from his business, but all the guests of the ball paid attention to something, or rather someone, who came here. Whispers can be heard in the crowd, among which Arietta can only make out someone's name, Redford. Arietta has no use for this name, which is why she sincerely does not understand why everyone is so distracted by it. She sees a strange man addressing a certain Lord Edwin. He says that he is very happy to see him at this ball, and adds that he has heard about the Lord's plans to visit these lands, which is why he decided to send an invitation to the ball. Arietta is unable to see this mysterious lord because of the size of the crowd, so she tries to look over someone else's shoulder, wanting to see the one who has captured the attention of everyone in the room. Luckily, she manages to do so, and now she sees a handsome young man with blonde hair. This guy immediately catches her attention, making her cheeks flush pink. Her heartbeat quickens as she continues to stare at the Lord of Amazing Beauty. In her mind, she wonders if it would be an insult to him if she called him beautiful, hinting that this word would not be enough. She even compares the guy to something divine, calling his proportions and facial features perfect. She decides that he is the most beautiful person she has ever seen in her life. A young, handsome man walks through the hall. He looks up at the main character who has caught his attention. Their eyes meet, and the girl is surprised, not expecting him to look at her. Due to her strong emotions, Arietta can't keep her feet on the ground and falls to her knees, blushing even more. The man notices this, slightly surprised. The girl doesn't dare to look up at him with her nervous gaze. She begins to tremble, shyly trying to say something, maybe somehow justify herself. Mentally, she scolds herself, calling herself a fool. The guy gets down on one knee and politely extends his hand to the heroine, asking if she is okay. Arietta stares at him, fascinated, mentally noting that the young man smells good. She shyly puts her hand on the boy's outstretched hand. The girl is mentally nervous that he is not the same as the other nobles who mock her. The young lord gently but hastily pulls her to him, helping her to stand up. After that, he hurriedly walks past her, returning to his original business. Arietta stands still, head down. Her face shows sadness. She realizes that she doesn't have to worry. There was no judgment on this guy's face. Moreover, there were no feelings in his eyes toward her. She trembles and even catches herself thinking that it would be better to be judged than this. If she had been judged, she would not have felt so miserable. The protagonist's dream is to be reflected in these emotionless eyes of the mysterious lord at least once. With this thought in mind, she shouts out a request to wait after the young man. But her aunt interrupts her, not allowing her to finish her sentence when she puts her hand on her niece's shoulder. Arietta looks back and sees Aunt Lillian's worried gaze. The aunt grabs her niece by the face and bombards her with a bunch of questions, ranging from why the girl fell to whether Lillian shouldn't really worry about her niece's health, as Rosa, the protagonist's mother, told her. After calming down a bit, Aunt Lillian sighs and says that Arietta surprised not only her, but also the Countess and her son Derek with her disappearance, even upsetting them. But when she turns her attention to her niece, she realizes that she doesn't even look in her direction, let alone listen to her. Lillian shouts Arietta's name to get her inattentive niece's attention. The girl turns her head toward her, but not for long. After a few seconds, she looks back at the man she liked so much and decides to ask her aunt about him. Aunt Lillian does not immediately understand which of the men Arietta is asking about, and for a moment mistakenly thinks that she is referring to Earl Shanks. But the girl immediately corrects her aunt, directing her to the person she had in mind from the beginning, the young gentleman who helped her up just a couple of minutes ago. Looking at the mysterious lord, the protagonist's cheeks are once again covered with a pink blush. It was hard for Titona not to notice her niece's emotions. She calls the mysterious young man Lord Edwin, and Arietta becomes even more enchanted, noting that even his name sounds charming. Trying to bring her niece down from her dreams to the ground, her aunt firmly tells her not to waste her time and herself on meaningless feelings. Arietta's face changes. and then she turns to her aunt, asking her what she means. Lillian, in turn, remarks that the girl understands everything perfectly well and should know that she is not the first woman to look at a young lord in this way. Arietta blushes again, this time with shame, nervously biting her lower lip. The aunt just sighs in concern and asks the girl if she knows the name Redford. Arietta asks again, obviously not having a clue who she is talking about. Mrs. Lillian tells her about the Duke of Radford, whose family goes back to the founding of the Kingdom of Brimdell. She calls this family the most powerful in the entire kingdom. Leaving aside the royal family, the Redford family is the most noble family in Brimdell, and this handsome young man is their direct heir, on his way to becoming the next duke. Repeating this in her head, Arietta was visibly confused as she realized who she was standing next to. The aunt continues that the title is not the only advantage of the Redford family. She notes that the girl has no idea how many extremely talented and intelligent people are descended from the Redford family. She adds that some people even say that this family is the most important treasure of the kingdom. In conclusion, my aunt says that Lord Edwin has no equal even among the Redford family. She also reminds us that Arietta is the daughter of unknown aristocrats from a very small village. He and Lord Edwin are like the earth and distant stars that cannot be reached. Aristocrats, no matter what anyone thinks, are not equal. Aunt Lillian even says that low-ranking aristocrats like them don't even dare to talk to the likes of the Redford family. She also believes that, in this family's view, aristocrats like them are no different from ordinary peasants. In the end, she adds that you shouldn't look at a tree you can't climb. The girl is upset by her aunt's words and says that she does not understand who should be a worthy match for her. She cites Lord Derek, who is no different, and Count Marlin, who is much older than Arietta herself. In an emotional tone, she asks if she will have to choose someone whom she will have to love, so to speak. And if this is true, will these feelings be sincere? Aunt Lillian looks at her niece with concern and sadness. Arietta continues, repeating her aunt's phrase about the tree. She says that having a dream that she will follow is something that no one can forbid her to do. The aunt apologizes, saying that she is sorry if she has offended her dear niece. She adds that she really wants the best for Arietta, which is why she said all this. She also says that despite all this, there are still things in this world that cannot be done about, and some of them are almost impossible to reach. The girl asks if she means Lord Edwin by this. The aunt gently strokes her head and says that she is still very young, and she would not want to see her upset. She says that Arietta may be a rebel who never listens to her aunt, but that doesn't stop her from being her dear niece. Tears begin to flow from Arietta's eyes when Aunt Lillian puts her hand on her cheek. She accepts this, but says she doesn't think she can forget Lord Edwin so quickly. The aunt reassures her niece that she will eventually forget him, because this world is full of wonderful and handsome men. With hope in her eyes, Arietta asks if these men will be more wonderful than Lord Edwin. For a moment, the aunt is silent, but a second later she smiles lovingly and confirms the girl's words. Mentally, she decides that her niece will soon forget him, because girls her age are not constant in their moods. After a while, she and her aunt are heading somewhere in a carriage. The aunt is concerned that her niece has not yet left Levante. The aunt smiles nervously and tells the girl that Rosa, her mother, sent a letter asking when her daughter plans to return home. The girl passively replies that she'll be back later. Her aunt reminds her of how she had recently wanted to return to her home. She asks the girl what she means by later. Did she mean when she said this, that later was when Lord Edwin would also leave here, returning to the capital? The girl blushes shyly and furrows her brows as her aunt continues, adding that she hasn't even seen him since that evening. Not once, not even counting today. Arietta partially denies her aunt's claim, saying that she saw Lord Edwin a few days ago. The aunt laughs and asks the girl in a joking tone if she was hiding near the Marquess of Rickenell's house, waiting for Lord Edwin to appear. The girl blushes again, and then awkwardly adds that she was hiding from afar, which helped her see Lord Edwin that day. The aunt clearly does not look pleased with this act. Arietta thinks that a long time has passed since she first saw Lord Edwin. During this time, she managed to turn 16 and successfully made her debut as an adult. However, the heroine does not even remember the man she spent that day with. Since then, she attended every ball and event where she hoped to meet Lord Edwin again. Unfortunately, she did not succeed in any of them. At some point, she learned that Lord Edwin visited the residence of the Marquess of Rickeneuil quite often. Arietta even went there on her own once. However, the girl only had to stand at the gate, and she was worried that her presence might arouse suspicion. At one point, she even thought about returning to her aunt. But at another moment, she sees a carriage rushing past her. In her window, she notices the familiar silhouette of Lord Edwin. The heroine is happy to see him and even smiles, blushing a little. But the carriage moves away from her. The girl is brought back from her memories by her aunt, who harshly slaps a folded fan on her hand. She says that she is really worried about her niece, who doesn't seem to understand the value of pain, that she went through unrequited love with whom she has no chance. Arietta looks down sadly and mentally says that in fact she would like to stop her feelings just as much. The girl realizes that she looks reckless because of her behavior, but if she could, she would have stopped these feelings long ago. But unfortunately, her feelings are only getting worse. Over time, the news of the death of the ideal heir to the Duke of Radford and the Marquis of Ricannon's beautiful daughter spread throughout the kingdom. After this news, people immediately realized the reason for the Duke's frequent visits to the Rickeneuil residence. This pause was the result of a really successful game. Even without the same power as the Redford family, the Rickeneuil family is still considered prominent in the kingdom. Many people from different walks of life sincerely welcomed and blessed their marriage. Except for one person, Lady Arietta. The girl cried for many days and nights without taking any food in her mouth. She lost her sense of time and a part of herself after this news. The concerned aunt sent a letter to the girl's mother, telling her about her daughter's condition. The worried mother immediately arrived in Levante to see her daughter. Upon arriving, the mother runs into her daughter's room and asks her excitedly what happened to her. She says that the girl could get seriously ill if she continues to eat nothing. She hugs her daughter and invites her to come home, adding that the whole family misses her, especially Hugo. The girl quietly repeats this name. She recalls that Hugo is her younger brother, who loves her and always follows her. The memory of the boy hugging his sister tightly before he left and telling her that she had to come back and tell him about Levante in her letters pops into my head. Realizing that she had managed to forget about her brother in all these events, Arietta begins to cry. It was the first time in a long time that she had heard from him again. All this melted away the old feelings of grief for home and family. At this point, Arietta clings to her mother, letting her emotions run wild. After a while, the main character was already at home, sitting at her desk. She was holding a letter from someone. Looking at the writing, she wondered about the meaning of what was in the letter. All her thoughts are interrupted by her younger brother, who runs into the girl's room without warning. Arietta is frightened because she was not expecting anyone at that moment and easily scolds her brother, saying that he should knock. Hugo jokingly replies that they don't need these formalities, and then asks his sister if she has planned anything fun without him. Ariette mentally scolds her brother, noting that he was nicer when she was traveling to Levante. Noticing a crumpled letter in his sister's hand, Hugo asks about its contents. Arietta replies that it is a letter from Aunt Lillian and asks if her brother would like to see it. My brother replies that he does not, adding that this letter will not be different from the previous ones, in which my aunt will say that she plans to visit Filiocia, but as usual, she will not come. My sister says that my brother should understand that few people from the city would want to go to such a village, which my brother understands. Anyway, Hugo changes the subject, reminding his sister of her promise to teach him to ride a horse without a saddle. He asks her to do it today, unless she has plans. Arietta recalls her promise, then rubs her cheek awkwardly and politely refuses her brother. Hugo asks her why she refused, and Arietta reminds him that she is under house arrest because she recently broke a window while testing a new bow. The brother is visibly upset, tragically falling headlong onto the sofa in the room. He complains that the plans were cut short, Although he was very happy about his sister's promise, Arietta sits down next to her brother and tries to cheer him up, stroking his head. She tells him not to be upset because they will have a chance to do it again. After thinking for a second, her sister speaks in a cheerful tone about hunting hares with a bow. She asks her brother what he thinks of the idea. My brother is noticeably more cheerful because he has always dreamed of learning to do this. He looks up and, practically beaming with happiness, asks his sister if she is serious about this offer. The heroine realizes that she has been caught using this word. Hugo says that he will consider this offer as a promise and warns his sister not to forget about it. The girl reassures him that she has never lied to him before. His brother smiles and says that he is very happy that they are spending time together again. At these words, the smile on the girl's face disappears. Arietta recalls how, when she was still at Levante, her Aunt Lillian used to reassure her, saying that time would solve everything and nothing would last forever, and her sadness is no exception. The protagonist notes that what Aunt Lillian told her was only half true. At first, she did not believe that she could get out of the pit of this sadness, but eventually she managed to do so. Despite this, she admits to herself that everything has actually remained the same. Lord Edwin, whom she met that day, left a huge mark on her that will stay with her for a long time. Upon reflection, Arietta smiles and agrees with her brother, saying that it does remind her of the old days. Arietta, her brother and her mother are having lunch sitting at the table. At one point, the mother asks the girl if she plans to go to Levante in the near future. She notices that her aunt misses her niece. Arietta is a little surprised by this proposal, to which her mother says that Aunt Lillian probably just adores her. The woman also adds that public events will begin at the end of this month. She asks why the girl shouldn't go to her lonely aunt and visit her. Arietta is indignant, wondering if her mother really thinks she has already let go of the events of the past year. Awkwardly moving the food on her plate with her fork, Arietta says that it's only been a month since she returned home and she wants to spend this summer here. In response, her mother says that she does not propose a long trip. She asks her daughter for her opinion on going away for just a month. Arietta responds with silence. The woman adds that Arietta is already 17 years old and hints that it's time for her to think about the future, or rather, about her death. Arietta indignantly says that she does not want to get married. The mother notes that she does not say that there is a need for a wedding right now, but he also says that the company needs to start looking at potential partners now. This conversation upsets the protagonist, to which her mother says that they will talk about it next time. But she must understand that she cannot escape from it, even if she really wants to. The mother also expresses her hopes for her father's early return so that Arietta can use their carriage to travel to the Levant. At this point, Arietta's younger brother looks up, noticing a noise coming from the street. A second later, a joyful smile appears on his face, and he exclaims that his dad has finally arrived. A father stands in the yard and notices his family heading in his direction. His wife was the first to approach him, jokingly tapping him on the shoulders, saying that she was worried about him because he hadn't written anything. The man apologizes with a smile. The woman immediately changed her mood and said that it was nothing, because the only thing that mattered was that he was back. At this display of love between their parents, Arietta and Hugo laugh quietly, finding it cute. The woman invites him home, thinking that he is very tired. The man replies that he would like to show them all someone first. Arietta asks her father in surprise, interested in what he has to say. The father says that it was quite unexpected, and then a man in chains appears in front of them. His father calls him 11542 and tells him that he is their new slave, who will live with them from that day on. Arietta is horrified by what she sees, recognizing the man in front of her. The slave with blonde and long hair in front of her seems to be Lord Edwin himself. The shock caused her eyes to blur, and she fainted. The memory of the content of a letter from my aunt flashes before my eyes, in which she mentions some rumors that have been circulating in the kingdom lately. After a while, the girl wakes up in her bed. She decides that it was all just a bad dream. The girl says that she did not suspect that Lord Edwin would dream of her as a slave. She notices that she hasn't dreamed about him in a long time and he didn't look exactly like she remembered him. The next moment, she hears her brother's voice calling her name in concern. He enters her room with a tray in his hands and a glass with something on it. He is happy that his sister has finally woken up, to which Arietta is slightly surprised, still awake. Arietta tells him that it's only morning, and she hasn't slept for so long. My brother reacts surprised, saying that it is already evening. With this, he surprises his sister, who is surprised that it will soon be sunset. She does not believe that she slept for so long, and her brother tells her that he and her parents were very worried about her when she collapsed in the street. Hugo hands his surprised sister a glass of tea with honey and jam. Arietta would have been grateful for this, but she interrupts herself and asks her brother in surprise if she really fainted. Her brother tells her that yes, she fell in front of the yard. Hearing this, the girl almost jumped up on the spot, splashing her tea. She is shocked to realize that all this time, she was not sleeping but unconscious. Getting out of bed, Arietta hurriedly leaves the room, ignoring her brother's surprise. She realizes that if it wasn't a dream, then the real Lord Edwin is now their slave. She realizes that if it wasn't a dream, then the real Lord Edwin is now their slave. The heroine runs into her father's office, which confuses him. Before her father can say anything, Arietta starts bombarding him with questions about what happened. Her father asks her again, not knowing what she is talking about, and she asks what Lord Edwin is doing in their filioque if he is supposed to be in the capital. She also asks about the young man's appearance. Her father just looks at her in surprise, asking who this Lord Edwin is. Arietta says that she means the person her father brought back. The man asks her if she means the slave number 11542, to which the girl just stares at him in surprise, asking what the number means. The father replies that each slave is given a serial number, which is usually used as a name. Arietta slams the table excitedly, telling her father not to say such horrible things. She asks if her father even knows who Lord Edwin is. Without waiting for an answer, she shouts that he is the only heir to the Redford family. At the time, the father is surprised by this statement from his daughter, but the very next moment he starts laughing, saying that Arietta must still be asleep. He obviously cannot believe that slave number 11542 is the heir to a noble family. Arietta looks at her father in disbelief, who adds that this slave was given to him by an old acquaintance of his, in gratitude for a favor he had done in the past. To confirm his words and make his daughter believe, he gets her an official document. Peering at the writing, Arietta notices the royal seal, which leaves no doubt about the authenticity of this document. Arietta has no choice but to stare in shock at the document, which says, in black and white, that the slave number 11542 has been transferred to Arietta's family. The father gently pulls the document out of his daughter's hands, telling her to rest for a while longer to finally come to her senses. Arietta asks him who gave him this slave. The father mentions the name of the Marquis of McKnight, telling his daughter that he is a very influential man in the kingdom who owns real estate near the capital. Arietta nervously clenches her hand into a fist, realizing that a mistake has been made somewhere. She is absolutely sure that it was Lord Edwin who was standing in front of her, and not an ordinary slave. Thinking back to her aunt's letter, she suspects that the rumors Lillian mentioned were related to this. Arietta wants to know what happened to Lord Edwin. After some time passed, Arietta was already in the courtyard, secretly watching Lord Edwin. Edwin, on the other hand, was fulfilling his obligations as a slave, which he had to be now. I was cleaning the yard. Arietta recalls that 5 days have passed since Lord Edwin arrived here. During this time, she did not have time to do anything but secretly monitor how he was doing his job. The girl wanted to come up and say hello, but she was too worried about leaving a bad impression. She even adds that she would rather die than all this. Sighing, the girl thinks about everything that has been so exciting for her these past 5 days. Where to start, why and how Lord Edwin ended up here, and what he went through. But all of Arietta's thoughts are interrupted by her brother, who suddenly puts his hand on her sister's shoulder, asking her what she is doing here. The girl is obviously frightened and screams, which scares her brother. Trying to keep the silence, she grabs her brother's face and pulls him to her hiding place, where she gestures to him to be quiet. Reassuring herself, she thinks that Edwin was too busy to hear the noise. Peeking out from the hiding place, she wanted to see confirmation of these words. But to her great regret, Lord Edwin notices her, and they lock eyes. The girl is very embarrassed, regretting that she has been noticed. She holds her head, trying to survive the flurry of emotions. The brother does not understand his sister's reaction, mentally assuming that she could have hit her head when she lost consciousness. Finally, Arietta looks up at her brother, who asks if this is the slave her father brought back a few days ago. She hears her brother say that he was just wishing to talk to him. Arietta tries to stop her brother, but it's too late, as he is already walking toward Lord Edwin. Approaching the slave, Hugo asks him in a supercilious tone what he is doing. The slave answers the boy's questions with silence. Without waiting for an answer, Hugo gets irritated and yells at 11542, noting that he heard him. But something makes him stop talking, staring in surprise at the slave. In response, the boy receives a cold and eerie look from the young man. This reaction makes Hugo tremble with fright. Lord Edwin calmly replies that he is working and that he has to clean the stables today. Hugo awkwardly replies with something unintelligible, to which Arietta mentally pities the boy, comparing him to a frightened puppy. After calming down, Hugo asks 11542 if he likes his room. He adds that this used to be his room for studying, but now he has given it to a slave, so he has to share the same room with his sister. Lord Edwin is silent for a while, then replies that the room looks ordinary. The protagonist's brother is surprised and quietly asks him again, and is confirmed that he heard everything correctly. Hugo remains silent as his face rapidly turns red and his eyebrows furrow. Arietta, who is watching, recalls that this room was her brother's favorite. He angrily clenches his hand into a fist and says that usually slaves are given only a corner in the residence, and he should be grateful that he has the whole room. The next moment he breaks down in tears and says that he doesn't know how luxurious the old slave's place of residence was, but his behavior is insolent. At this point, Arietta tears them down and comes out of hiding, ordering her brother to stop. She approaches them and says that Hugo is being too rude and that he should apologize to 11542. Hugo sincerely does not understand why he should apologize to some slave. Arietta takes the initiative and apologizes for her brother, bowing slightly to Lord Edwin. Noticing this, the girl's brother says that her father will be very angry if he finds out about this behavior on her part. Arietta yells at him to stop and then asks if her brother knows who the man in front of him is. Hugo replies that he knows because he is a slave, slave number 11542. This makes the girl even more angry, which makes her want to tell her brother, but she cuts herself off halfway through the sentence, wondering whether she even has the right to disclose this information about the heir to the great Redford family. The heroine realizes that if she tries to prove to others that this slave is the heir to the Redford family, the only reaction she will get is condemnation, after which she will be considered crazy. She also doesn't feel comfortable dumping all this information about Lord Edwin right in front of his nose. Arietta stutters, trying to quickly think of something to say. But this awkward pause is broken by Lord Edwin himself, who greets the protagonist, calling her Lady Arietta and saying that they have not seen each other for a long time. The lady looks back at him in surprise, and he continues that this is definitely the first time they have met since he helped her last time. The girl is genuinely surprised, asking the young man if he really remembers her. She recalls the very first meeting, when he politely shook hands with her at a ball. But unexpectedly for her, Edwin reacts with indignation and slight surprise, saying that his memory is not so bad that he cannot remember events that happened only a few days ago. Lady Arietta changes her face to one of surprise, asking what he means. Edwin reminds her that a couple of days ago she fainted in front of him and her entire family. When she realizes her mistake, she blushes with shame. He adds that he tried not to touch her, but due to the circumstances, he was the only person who could help her at that moment. Arietta smiles awkwardly and then says that Lord Edwin does not remember her then. Not understanding this reaction, the young man asks if they have met before. Arietta rubs her hand awkwardly and then replies that she does not. She says she made a mistake, For some reason, after these words, Edwin's gaze noticeably cools. Arietta puts on a friendly smile and expresses her gratitude to Edwin for helping her that day. The man says she shouldn't thank him because it's his job, but Arietta adds that she can't help but be grateful to him because he really helped her back then. She adds that if Lord Edwin needs any help, she will always be ready to provide it. With these words, she sincerely worries her brother. Pausing, Edwin decides to ask her something, but the girl abruptly remembers, or rather invents, that she has business to attend to that is related to her mother. Her brother is surprised by these words and tries to correct Arietta, saying that it is impossible because her mother is not at home, but away. But his sister's reaction is not long in coming, and she pinches his arm, showing him that he needs to be quiet. Hugo yelps in pain and does not understand why his sister treats him like this. But the girl is not up to it, so she tries to leave quickly and tells her brother that he should also go with her. And then, without waiting for his consent, drags him away, leaving the man standing alone. He can only stare at the backs of his brother and sister, who are hastily retreating and quietly talking about something. The young lord's gaze turns eerie and cold again. The next day, Arietta plans to watch Lord Edwin again, but to her surprise, at some point she loses sight of him. The heroine finds it strange that she cannot find him. She thinks that he might have changed his direction while moving, which is why they got separated. Having finally lost her object of interest, Arietta is slightly upset, continuing to look out the window in search of her husband. But the very next moment, someone suddenly touches the girl's shoulder, which frightens her and makes her scream. Looking back in the direction of the culprit of her fright, she realizes that it is the very person she was looking for, Lord Edwin. Edwin apologizes for frightening her, explaining that he was trying to prevent her from falling out of the window. Arietta blushes, shocked by the boy's gesture, and shyly replies that everything is fine. Edwin politely asks her if she was looking for someone a few moments ago, apparently having noticed her strange behavior. The main character is immediately embarrassed because the person she was looking for is Lord Edwin. She stammered out that no, she was actually just planning to take a walk in the yard. In her thoughts, Arietta cannot help but notice how polite Lord Edwin is in front of her, but all this kindness is combined with a rather eerie aura around him. She suspects that if she doesn't leave now, something really bad could happen. After these thoughts, the girl decides to leave, justifying it with some business. But to her surprise, Edwin cuts her off by saying that he might be wrong now, as if making a preface to his next actions. After these words, the man rather abruptly grabs the lady's wrist. Squeezing her hand tightly, he asks Lady Arietta in a creepy tone if she knows him. The girl is frightened and freezes, and then stammering asks what he is talking about, trying to pretend that she knows nothing. He doesn't fall for it and repeats his question without loosening his grip on the girl's hand for a second. Arietta replies in a sharp tone that she does not, and screams in fright for the man to let go of her hand. Nevertheless, at one point she manages to escape from the man's grip. But this doesn't really improve the situation, because at the same moment she can't keep her feet on the ground because of a sharp jerk, and she starts to fall. The girl falls loudly to the floor. Her eyes are frightened. The protagonist is silent for a while, gathering her thoughts in her head and realizing the whole situation. At some point, she finally gathers enough courage to impulsively ask a provocative question. What if she does know him? Without waiting for an answer from Edwin, she confidently gets up from the floor. Looking sternly into the offender's eyes, she adds that she wonders what will happen if she does know that he is part of the Redford family. The man's gaze becomes more eerie than before when he hears this name from the girl's mouth. Finally convinced of his guesses, the man blurts out that the girl does know his true identity. Realizing what a mistake she has just made, Arietta covers her mouth with her hand in shock. Lord Edwin says he has heard that the urban region is not particularly interested in the events of the rest of the kingdom. Based on this statement, the man wonders how Arietta knows who he is. He also asks if the reason for this is that someone told Arietta about it in advance, before the lord ended up in her family as a slave. At this, Arietta only silently shakes her head, a gesture that denies Lord Edwin's words. Taking a step toward the girl, Edwin asks her decisively if anyone else knows about it, and Arietta stammeringly replies that she does not. Continuing to attack, the Lord adds that from the very beginning, he did not trust the person who brought him here. He even suggests that the whole thing was set up as a kind of joke on Edwin. Edwin asks the girl what the unknown man's secret motive is for sending the Lord to this place. Arietta, confused by these words, only asks the man again, obviously not having the answers to his questions. The girl takes a couple more steps back, after which her back meets the wall with a jolt, and Arietta realizes, to her great regret, that she no longer has any room to retreat. With a sinister smile on his face, Edwin asks her if she wants him to crawl like a dog, or to be under the influence of drugs and fulfill all her wishes. Arietta just looks into his eyes, frightened, not understanding what the man is talking about. Edwin moves even closer to her, then takes her by the face and lifts her up so that their eyes meet. He tells her to stop trembling, adding a question about whether she wants to attract him in this way. Arietta's heart is about to jump out of her chest. The girl looks at his face in horror, beginning to tremble more and more. She stammered and said that she did not understand what he was talking about. Leaning down to the girl, Lord Edwin runs his fingers through Arietta's hair and, as if mocking, says that she should use stronger drugs on him if she wants any reaction, all because she does not match his tastes. Without stopping there, Edwin leans into her ear and whispers that none of this really matters, because under the influence of illegal substances, everyone will look the same to him. Unable to withstand such pressure from the boy, Arietta pushes him away from her and shouts at him to stop his actions. Trembling and stammering with fear, Arietta asks him what he was going to do to her. Looking up, she asks what the man was trying to do to her with these actions. Lord Edwin responds to her words with a cold stare, not understanding why the girl keeps playing the innocent. Tears well up in the heroine's eyes, and she confusedly asks Edwin what happened to him. These words surprise Edwin, and his face changes slightly. The girl says she remembers him as the highest aristocrat. Tears drip from her eyes as she says she doesn't understand why he became the way he is now. Lord Edwin freezes, looking at Arietta, while his hair blows sideways in the wind. At this moment, he recalls his past, and a woman who openly mocked his situation appears in his memories. He remembers himself as a slave, chained to a chain. In the memories, a man appears, telling Edwin that he must continue to live and repent for the sins of his family that betrayed the kingdom until the end of his life. He adds that this is the only thing Edwin can do. Lord Edwin recalls that everything changed overnight when his family was accused of treason. On the same night, all bearers of the Redford family name were brutally murdered. Everyone except Edwin himself. He notes that many things played a role in his survival. First of all, his old friendship with the prince. When Edwin knelt before the prince, he asked him why he was still alive. He pleads with the prince for his early death. At these words, the prince looks back at Edwin and says that he should strive to live. He continues that his death will be the end of the entire Redford family. He asks him to remember the death of his parents and to remember that they would not have wanted the same for him. Everyone wanted Edwin to choose this path, but Edwin himself no longer knew what was right. He changed his name to a number, which meant that he was erasing his past life. He was not sure whether he had chosen the right path. The feeling of sadness over time made Edwin, in his words, almost rot alive. He recalls that when he was the heir to the Redford family, all people looked at him with smiles, showing nothing else. But as soon as Edwin lost everything, these same people showed their true colors by attacking the Lord. It was a real hell for him. Moral fatigue and physical pain were relatively less of a problem. What really drove him crazy was the shame and humiliation he felt. Every day he wanted revenge on those who were worse than cattle. But more than that, he wanted only his own death. But every time Lord Edwin wanted to do so, he remembered the prince's words, the way he ordered him to live, saying that he had to spend the rest of his life repenting of all the actions of which his family was accused. Over time, he stopped understanding who was to blame for all this. Were they people who mocked him? Or was it just him coming to terms with his fate? Lord Edwin concludes with the idea that if the goal of these people was to destroy his soul and personality, they have already gotten what they wanted. He comes out of his memories when he sees Arietta looking at him with a sincere look. This makes him surprised and freeze for a while. The girl confesses to Lord Edwin that she has indeed seen him before. She recalls that it happened at a ball held in Levant. She recalls that the Lord practically shone against the background of everyone else there that night. Correcting herself, Arietta says that he was the most wonderful person she had ever seen in her entire life. Continuing, the girl says that she realized then that even a star falling from the night sky would not be as beautiful as Edwin was that day. The girl had no idea how one single meeting could stay in her heart for so long. She adds that Lord Edwin was still worth it. She tells us that she heard about the things that Lord Edwin had to go through just a couple of days ago from a letter that came from Aunt Lillian. As the man said, people in Philiotia are not as interested in events outside as they are in their land affairs. That's why, until Arietta saw Edwin in front of her, she had no idea that something terrible had happened in the capital. Lord Edwin, looking into Arietta's honest eyes, mentally notes how sincere the girl's gaze is. If what she told Lord Edwin was true, then all those days she had been watching him were not part of some horrible plan. All this was only because she has a pure and good heart. Realizing this, Edwin asks himself what he has done. He thinks the girl hates him for what he did. In his opinion, his actions deserve any punishment. Looking at Arietta, he decides that she has every right to do so. After that, the heroine bows before him, saying that she is sorry. This only surprises Edwin more, forcing him to look at her with a look of bewilderment. She apologizes for being impolite about the events that happened in Edwin's life. She notes that before all this, she thought Edwin had a happy life, or rather I believed and hoped for it. She recalls that she often jumped to conclusions without knowing her husband's true feelings and emotions. She bends down, crying and trembling, and says that she thought of herself as the only person who was suffering at the time. She concludes by saying that she wishes to apologize to Lord Edwin from the bottom of her heart. In surprise, Edwin takes a step back, mentally wondering why this girl is apologizing to him, a slave, if she is not obliged to do so. Unable to stop her tears, she apologizes again, adding that she cannot imagine how such terrible things could have happened to Edwin. Edwin thinks that everyone around him thought he deserved it, while he didn't even understand the reason why he was hated. He looks at Arietta and cannot say a word. He has only one question on his mind. Why? Why does a girl like Arietta need to cry over him? The next day, Arietta stands in the stables, gently brushing her horse. At one point, she is distracted by her brother, who asks her if he is the only one who has noticed something strange. Unable to understand what is being said, Arietta asks Hugo what he is talking about as he comes closer to her. Coming closer, Hugo points behind him, showing Edwin. He says he has noticed that he has seen him too often in recent days. Arietta looks at Edwin and mentally notes that her husband was not here when she came to the stables. The girl looks at Edwin for a while longer and then turns back to her horse. She tells Hugo not to make stuff up. Their house isn't that big after all. Everything is just a couple of steps away. She adds that it would have been stranger if she and Edwin hadn't met at all. Hugo sighs irritably and says that at first he also wanted to reduce it all to a mere coincidence. But to be honest, he admits that he was wrong. He finds it very interesting that when he is alone, you can't even see a single hair on their new slave. But when Arietta is around, this slave has to be seen more than a few times a day. Arietta sighs and calmly tells her brother that it's all just a coincidence. Hugo openly disagrees with his sister, furrowing his brow. Pointing to the place where their slave is now cleaning, the boy recalls that their maid Anna has already finished her work here. He asks his sister to look at the ground and adds that it is clean enough to clean there. Arietta looks thoughtfully at her husband, mentally realizing that perhaps earlier she would have given in to her brother and started to suspect everything. But now that she knows a lot of things, she might think she's interested in Edwin. But still, the girl notes that she cannot say for sure whether this is the real reason why the man appears so often next to her. With a slight smile on her face, Arietta calmly tells her brother that someone probably just ordered Edwin to clean the place again. Arietta recalls that after that misunderstanding between them, she began to avoid Edwin. But the reason for this was not a lack of sympathy for her. She simply decided that Edwin would not be comfortable being around her, especially after what happened between them. She also recalls everything Edwin told her and believes that he experienced a lot of violence against him, which led to this behavior. At least she would hope that she did not make a mistake with this statement. Meanwhile, Hugo continues to express his suspicions, believing that something in the slave's behavior is not right. To distract her brother from these thoughts, Arietta says that if he doesn't stop talking nonsense, she will leave him here alone. It works, and Hugo is immediately distracted and asks Arietta to wait. Sitting astride their horses, the brother and sister head for the exit. Arietta instructs her brother that if he does not listen to her carefully enough, this will be their last horseback ride. Her brother reassures her that she knows him, and he is no longer a child. Arietta jokingly says that in fact, Hugo is just a child because he is only 10 years old. The boy is slightly indignant at these words. As Arietta passes through the courtyard, she notices Edwin, who is looking at her in the same way. His gaze is directed precisely at her, although he does not express any emotions. Noticing this, Arietta is slightly surprised and embarrassed. Feeling uncomfortable, the heroine mentally does not understand why he is staring at her like that. She admits that the reason for this may be her riding clothes, in which Lord Edwin has not yet seen her. The girl smiles and nods to the man. After that, she turns her head in the other direction, and they walk away together. This leaves Edwin watching lonely, as Arietta and her brother drift away from him. During the hunt, a brother and sister try to catch a rabbit. The brother drives the animal away from him, directing it toward his sister, which he immediately warns her about. Hugo adds that the rabbit is running toward the girl. Arietta tells her brother not to worry, while her hand reaches for one of the arrows. She takes up her bow, putting the arrow in the right place, and smilingly says that she is not just called a good shot. Arietta aims the arrow at the rabbit and then releases it, leaving it to fly toward the animal. But, fortunately for the animal, Arietta misses by a few centimeters. The heroine is surprised by this because she thought she would hit the target. She decides that she has failed because the arrows are too old. The brother rushes to chase the rabbit, telling his sister that he will try to direct it towards Arietta. Arietta tries to stop her brother and shouts at him not to go alone. But the brother does not hear his sister, continuing to chase the animal. Arietta stops and realizes that she doesn't recognize the area around them. She realizes that they have gone too deep into the forest. She turns to Hugo, wanting to tell him that they have to go back. But the next moment, something makes her freeze in fright. She shouts to her brother to stop and not go there. Still, the brother looks back at Arietta, not understanding the reason for his sister's fright. He notices that he is too close to the wolf trap, only when the rabbit he was trying to chase falls into it. This frightens Hugo to death and makes him confused at such a crucial moment. Arietta decisively rides toward her brother with the intention of saving him. She manages to push her brother's horse away with her own horse. It works, and Hugo's horse heads in the other direction, avoiding falling into the trap. But Arietta is not as lucky and slips out of the saddle, which causes her to fall into a trap. For some time, the girl's eyes were only dark. A few minutes later, she opens her eyes with difficulty, hearing her younger brother trying to call for her. Still, Arietta manages to regain consciousness. The brother, with tears in his eyes, rejoices that his sister survived. Clutching her head, Arietta tries to get up and mentally notes that she was just lucky that the ground she fell on was soft. This is what softened her fall and allowed her to remain relatively unharmed. But suddenly the emotions on the heroine's face change to anger. Arietta shouts to her brother that as soon as she gets up from here, he will not be welcome. She reminds him that she told him to follow her, not to run forward mindlessly. The brother says sadly that she can give him at least 10 times, but only after she gets out of the trap safely. He asks his sister if she can get up. At this time, Arietta touches the ground and decides that it would be good to look around. Running her hand over the ground, the heroine notices that it is quite soft because of the rain that fell yesterday. Arietta shouts to her brother that she needs some kind of tool to get out. She asks him if there are any vines around. My brother is not sure if it is available nearby. Then my sister asked about some branches that she could use. Hugo replies that he doesn't see it around and asks Arietta if he should try to find it for her. Arietta realizes that the vines will be easy to find. The only problem is that not every OUD is strong enough to support its weight, and it will be difficult for her little brother to cut off the stronger vines. After some thought, Arietta decides to suggest that her brother walk to the nearest village, where he could ask the locals for help. She tells him to go there and call the locals to tell them that his sister needs their help. She also tells her brother to remember to ask them to bring something like tools that Arietta could use to get out. The brother is quite concerned about his sister's situation, so he asks her if it would be dangerous for Arietta to stay in the pit alone. Arietta only laughs ironically, saying that her brother's presence will not help her. When night falls, they will both be eaten by wolves. This scares her little brother. In surprise and fright, the brother screams, and Arietta tells him that she is not joking, and that he really should hurry up and get to a village. After that, she finally reassures her brother, and he gets on his horse, rushing to get help. Finally, his sister advises him to stick to the area where he can see the grass being crushed. This means that they or other people have already walked there. Arietta is left alone, hoping that someone other than her father will come to her aid. Noticing that she had injured her leg, Arietta recalls that her parents were not very interested in her hobby. It doesn't matter if it's archery or horseback riding. Parents will always stand their ground. She wishes that Arietta had what her parents call more girlish interests. She is worried about how her parents will react to this trouble she got into while doing her favorite thing. Realizing that her parents are likely to take away her favorite bow and arrow, Arietta is upset. But realizing that she is far from being in a position to make a choice right now, she just sighs tiredly. Shifting her gaze to the rabbit lying not far from her, Arietta realizes that she is going through all this just because of this small prey. At this time, the rabbit, tired from a long run, sleeps peacefully. Some time passes, and Arietta begins to worry. Sitting in the cold pit, she shivers and wonders if her brother made it to the village in one piece. The village is not that far from here, but Arietta still worries about whether he was able to find his way there. Despite the fact that her brother may seem older, he is still a little boy. Arietta wonders if he was capable of finding his way on his own. This forces Arietta to face disturbing thoughts. The girl recalls that not so long ago, there was news that a local resident was attacked by a pack of hungry wolves, just as he came to this forest at night, alone. This makes Arietta seriously afraid for her brother's fate. But suddenly, the protagonist hears the crunch of a branch, which makes her realize that someone is nearby and is coming her way. Arietta is happy about this, thinking that it is Hugo who has finally brought the people who will save her. The heroine gets up and shouts her brother's name, asking if he is the person who came. She starts shouting his name louder, repeating it over and over again so that her brother can hear her for sure. But in response, Arietta receives only the silence of the forest. She lowers her head in disappointment and realizes that the source of the sound was most likely some wild animal in the forest. She doesn't want to sit there and let it go, so she decides to take the situation into her own hands. She takes off her gloves and rolls up her sleeves, preparing to get out on her own. Finding sticks in the pit, Arietta uses them to get out, sticking them into the ground, which is wet from the recent rain. And as if she were going to climb a mountain, she is getting closer to getting out of this trap. Almost reaching the surface, the girl is happy about it and prepares to climb out. Proud of herself, she smiles and thinks that she will never lose. But she is unlucky, and at the most crucial moment, her foot does not hold on to the support in the form of a stick, and she almost falls down. But fortunately for her, someone's hand grabs Arietta, holding the door open, which prevents her from falling down. The protagonist closes her eyes in fright, but realizing that someone is holding her, she decides to look up and is surprised. She shouts out a surprised, "You," obviously recognizing her savior as someone she knows. She asks a man with blonde and long hair how he ended up here, but he cuts off her question and says that he will answer her questions later. This man was Lord Edwin, who says that it is dangerous to spend his time talking now. He warns Arietta that he is going to pull her out and asks her not to resist so that it will be easier for him. Understanding his request, Arietta nods her head in agreement and awaits his rescue. Pulling the girl toward him, Edwin manages to save her. While Arietta is trying to catch her breath from the stress and physical exertion she has experienced, Edwin asks her if she is okay and if she has damaged anything while falling. Without answering the question posed by the man, Arietta asks him in surprise how he managed to find her. Lord Edwin replies that Arietta's younger brother told him what happened. Arietta asks Edwin about Hugo, asking if he's okay. The man replies that he looked very agitated, but had no wounds on him. This answer greatly reassures the girl, who is happy that her little brother has reached home safely. Edwin stands up and adjusts the saddle on his horse, telling Arietta that they should hurry to get home. He says that when it gets completely dark outside, getting home will be a much more difficult problem than it is now. Arietta gets up from the ground and limps to the horse with one leg. Noticing that the girl is injured, Edwin looks worried. His gaze quickly becomes more severe. He reminds the heroine that he asked her if she was injured. The girl didn't say anything to that. Arietta tells him that she just missed the opportunity to tell him about it. Edwin kneels before the heroine and apologizes to her. He takes the girl's leg and examines it for severe injuries. Arietta is embarrassed by this action, which makes her blush and mentally realize that her cheeks are red and her heart is beating so fast. But she is distracted from these thoughts by a sharp pain she feels in her leg. She screams at Edwin and asks him not to squeeze her leg so hard because it is obviously hurting her. Edwin tells her that her leg is swollen because of the injury. He adds that she pulled a bone, but the bones themselves remained intact. He advises her to stop overworking herself and to get some rest, so that her leg will recover in a week. Arietta asks him how he can know this if he is not a doctor. At these words, Edwin looks up at her. Vid confirms her words that he is not a doctor, but notes that he has seen quite a few such minor injuries in his life. After a while, they are on their way home. Arietta is sitting on a horse, and Edwin is accompanying her, guiding the horse to the right path. Arietta wants to say something, but by chance, she and Edwin start talking at the same time. The girl is embarrassed and then shyly asks him to continue and ask what he wanted. Edwin refuses to listen to her and says that she should say what she wanted to say first. Feeling uncomfortable, Arietta smiles and sweetly thanks Edwin for what he did for her. She also recalls that this is not the first time Edwin has had to save her, so she thanks him for saving her on the first day they met. Smiling, she notes that she realizes that she thanks her husband quite often, which is why she is a little embarrassed to say the word again. She blushes slightly and kindly tells Edwin that he can ask her for help, noting that she certainly doesn't have that much power. Arietta adds that if she can do something for him, she will definitely do it. Unable to take it anymore, Edwin asks Arietta if she always puts herself in dangerous situations like this. He surprises Arietta with this, and she awkwardly replies that Lord Edwin might have noticed the fact that she would always choose outdoor activities over anything else. She adds that this is something that has been bothering her parents since childhood. She says that she thinks she may be surprising Lord Edwin with this, because girls in the capital probably behave differently and have other interests. She finishes and then asks Edwin what he wanted to ask her then. For some reason, at this point, Edwin is anxious. He stops in his tracks, and Arietta calls out his name in surprise, trying to get her husband's attention. She tells Edwin that if it's difficult for him to talk about something he wants to, she won't force him. But Edwin cuts her off and recalls the day when they had a misunderstanding. Arietta is slightly surprised when she recalls that day. Turning to the girl, Edwin looks her in the eye, while a small blush appears on his cheeks. He asks her if she is angry with him for what happened back then. He even admits that a girl might be uncomfortable seeing him. This question surprises the girl quite a bit, even making her lose her breath. Edwin adds that he realizes that this question may sound very silly and obvious to Lady Arietta, but he would still like to apologize to her for his actions. He says that the right to forgive, or vice versa, is entirely up to Arietta, and he will fully understand if it turns out that he disgusts the girl. The man also adds that he understands that his actions that day will be difficult to forgive and impossible to justify. He also tells her that if she orders him to stay out of her sight, he will understand and comply. At this point, the girl catches him and asks him in surprise what he is saying. She doesn't understand why she should want this. Edwin recalls that she avoided him all the time, that they didn't talk for days, which is why he assumed she didn't want to contact him. Arietta can't take it anymore and shouts out to Edwin in surprise that he was completely wrong in his decision about her behavior. She says that it was she who thought that Edwin would be uncomfortable around her. Edwin, in turn, is surprised by the girl's words and asks her why he would want this. Arietta is surprised in response and asks if she was wrong about this. Edwin strongly confirms that the girl misunderstood him. The man himself is surprised by his sudden emotionality, which causes him to freeze a little. Arietta covers her mouth with her fist, blushing slightly at this reaction. She leans in a little, jokingly asking him if he means he is comfortable with her or not. Edwin is a little shy, so he squeezes the horse's leash and stammers, saying that he is not sure. Recalling her brother's words, Arietta asks if Edwin was worried that she was angry with him, and that is why he was avoiding her. Edwin is immediately embarrassed and denies it. The girl reacts with a smile and asks if he didn't want to take the time to apologize to her, to which Edwin says he doesn't understand what she's talking about. Arietta just smiles sweetly, realizing that he is lying to her. Rather rhetorically asking him if she is right, the girl notices that Lord Edwin blushes slightly. About a year has passed since that event. The seasons have changed one after another, and finally spring has come again. Edwin, standing in the yard, hears someone shouting his name. Turning in the direction of the source of the noise, he sees Lady Arietta looking out of the window, waving happily at him, greeting him. The father, who is standing not so far away, is frightened by his daughter's behavior and says that it is dangerous to look out of the window like this. Arietta ignores her father's warnings and tells Edwin to wait for her because she will be downstairs in a couple of minutes. Edwin looks at the happy-looking Arietta with concern. Already downstairs at Edwin's, the girl tries to get the boy's attention, who seems to be ignoring her, and asks if he wants to talk to her. When she gets no answer, Arietta looks at Edwin anxiously. She decides to gently pull him by a piece of clothing, asking him to look at her. Edwin pauses for a second, and then turns to Arietta, asking her if she has 10 extra lives on her. Arietta doesn't understand this question and asks Edwin why, to which he explains that he thought so because she puts herself in danger too often. He reminds her that he has already told her that it is very dangerous to look out of the window like that. Arietta tries to reassure the worried boy with a smile that she is no longer a child and does not need to be reminded of this. But Lord Edwin remains unwavering in his assertions and says that the girl should be more careful precisely because she does not know herself at all. Arietta is surprised and then asks the man what he means and whether anyone can know her better than she does. Edwin asks them a counter question, asking if Arietta wants him to list every incident that the girl, due to her negligence, has been involved in recently. Now the heroine understands what Edwin is talking about, which makes her smile awkwardly as she recalls the same incidents. Edwin reminds her of the time she was going to go into the woods to gather the materials she needed to practice archery. As a result of this adventure, she apparently got lost. Then the man recalls the time when Arietta decided that riding a horse without a saddle on it would be a good idea. As a result, she fell off that horse. Finally, Edwin reminds us that she recently cut her finger with a knife while trying to cut food faster. And this is not the only story that Edwin could remind the unwary protagonist of. Arietta tells Edwin that she is sorry as she wrings her hands awkwardly. She adds that she will try to be more careful next time. Edwin replies to the lady that she always says the same thing, but in the end, she doesn't keep her word. But Arietta corrects herself and says that this time she will be extra careful. Edwin watches Arietta look at him with this childlike confidence. Mentally, Edwin realizes that even if he makes promises now, Arietta will be on some new adventure tomorrow. He understands this, but he doesn't understand something else. Since when does he allow himself to let her go so easily, without even scolding her for her carelessness beforehand? Arietta folds her hands into a lock and pitifully asks Edwin if he is no longer angry with her, asking him not to be offended. Edwin is silent for a while, but then he smiles gently at the girl and confirms her words that he is not angry anymore. Mentally, he realizes that it is impossible for him not to buy into these little deceptions on Arietta's part. Arietta's whole family is sitting at the dining room table, with several appetizing dishes on it. Arietta and Hugo look at each other with determined glances, each of them wanting the only remaining piece of bacon. Suddenly, the girl's father distracts her from the bacon fight by noting that he hasn't seen Arietta in a while. He asks his daughter if she is busy with something. With a smile on her face, she denies it, adding that she spent all these days at home. The father continues to question Arietta, saying that despite her claims that she has spent all these days at home, the only time he is able to see her is during meals. The brother, who has already managed to grab the bacon from under Arietta's nose, says that the fact that Arietta is at home is not as important as where she spends her time at home. The father of the family asks Hugo what he means by his words. Hugo tells his father that Ariette usually spends her time in the stables, at work, or in the warehouse. It is in those places where the father does not visit as often, which is the reason why he does not get to see his daughter as often as he used to. The mother interrupts the conversation and asks Arietta if she is really still in contact with 11542. Arietta corrects her mother, saying that his name is Edwin. She also adds that Edwin is a wonderful person. The worried mother asks her daughter why she shouldn't start spending less time with Edwin. Arietta asks the reason for this, but her father interrupts the conversation and asks his wife not to worry so much. He confirms Arietta's words, saying that this slave really seems like a good guy. He says that even though this man is a slave, his actions are quite harmonious, and he has a bright and beautiful appearance. At the end, the father even adds that he is sorry that Edwin was born a slave. These words cannot help but make Arietta quietly sad. The mother of the family sighs, slightly irritated, and then tells her husband that Arietta is about to turn 18. She compares her daughter to herself, who at that time had already married her husband. That is the father of Arietta and Hugo. She says that despite Arietta's successful debut, she only went to social events like balls once a year. The rest of the time, she stubbornly wanted to spend at home. Her mother notes that this way Arietta will never have a gentleman who can become her husband. Arietta is embraced by her mother, who says with an embarrassed smile that it doesn't matter to her to get married. She would not have minded staying in Philiotia for the rest of her life. The mother tells her daughter that despite all their love for her, she cannot stay here forever. Sooner or later, she will have to start a family of her own. Arietta is clearly not happy with these statements and tries to interrupt her mother, but she doesn't give in and tells her daughter to stop, asking her not to complicate the situation even more than it already is. She asks her daughter to understand that she is doing this for her own safety. She adds to Arietta that they, the girl's parents, gave their daughter enough freedom, and it would be strange if Arietta didn't want to use it. Arietta just clenches her hands into fists, upset by her mother's words. The father tries to dilute the situation by asking his wife if she has any ideas on how to improve their daughter's situation. The mother mentions her sister Lillian, Arietta's aunt, who has long wanted to see her niece. The father awkwardly reminds his wife of what happened in Levante. They recall how terribly their daughter felt at the time when her heart was broken because of one-sided love. My mother says that Levante has nothing to do with it. If necessary, she will contact her friends in the capital, because there must be another way out of the situation if they do start searching. Hugo notices the sadness of his sister, who looks down at the table. He feels uncomfortable sitting at the table. The girl's mother asks Arietta, who has lost her former self from these conversations, what she thinks of the options her parents have proposed. Somewhere in the courtyard of Arietta's house, the maids are quietly talking among themselves, discussing the slave's magnificent physique. One of the maids says that she managed to talk to him once, and that even his voice is magical. They continue to discuss Edwin, talking about his thick hair, which hides an incredibly sweet face. Arietta, who had come up behind the maids unnoticed, asks whose face the two ladies are talking about. The maids are frightened and stammer and awkwardly tell Lady Arietta that they were just chatting while walking, not noticing Arietta sneaking up behind them. The girl looks to the side and sees Lord Edwin. She asks if it was him that the two maids were discussing so animatedly a moment ago. The girls are visibly embarrassed and actively deny it, arguing that they do not need it. Without giving Arietta a chance to ask anything else, the two maids quickly run away from her, leaving the heroine standing there in astonishment. But Arietta just smiles understandingly and mentally says that she understands their reaction because Edwin's beauty is really hard to resist. She comes closer to Edwin after these thoughts. Edwin notices the girl, saying her name instead of greeting her. He sees Arietta sadly sitting down on the ground, not far from him, then hugging her knees with her arms. Edwin notices the girl's obvious sadness. He decides to ask if something happened to Arietta that he doesn't know about. The girl looks up at Edwin, slightly confused by this question. In her head, she hears her mother's words, telling her to stay away from Edwin because he is the frame number 11542. She thinks about the fact that she spent a lot of time with Edwin. Even she would have gotten tired if someone so clingy was hanging around her. But surprisingly, Edwin never minded. At least he never told the girl something like to stop. Despite this, she still couldn't understand what Edwin was really thinking. Arietta even admits that perhaps Edwin would be happy if she told him that she would no longer be hanging around him. Edwin interrupts her thoughts by leaning over to her, calling her name. He asks her if she is going to answer his question. Arietta freezes, looking at the boy. In her head, she realizes that this is not what she wanted. She likes Edwin, so she would never wish him unhappiness. She reaches out to Edwin, thinking that if only he were still Redford. The girl touches the man's hair, concluding that he would not have even looked at Arietta once. Arietta gently runs her fingers through Edwin's hair, to which he reacts calmly. Arietta realizes that she is sickened by her selfishness, because when Edwin is here in the form of her slave, she feels some kind of relief and peace. Edwin says his hair is too long now. He corrects him and says that he needs a haircut today. She recalls what the maid said about Edwin's hair. With a smile on her face, the girl gently asks the boy not to do it. She tells Edwin that she will be leaving for Levant today. Edwin is surprised, asking the girl again. Arietta reminds him that she once told him about this place. She explains that her Aunt Lillian lives there. The girl says that Lillian became a widow at an early age, and she has no children, which makes her lonely. That is why she asked Arietta to visit her as soon as possible. Edwin silently lowers his head when he hears the news. Arietta adds that she won't be at Levante for too long, maybe 3 or 4 months. It may even return by the beginning of the fall season. Edwin whispers, repeating the number of months she plans to spend with her aunt. Arietta says her mother is worried that her daughter may never get married. This is quite a big concern for a woman. But still, Arietta believes that a trip to Levante will change little. At this, she shrugs her shoulders with an embarrassed smile. Even more sadly, Arietta says that she will be wasting her time again. She compares herself to a lonely flower growing on a wall. Edwin says, understandingly, that it means that Arietta is looking for a husband. Arietta partially confirms his words. Edwin says that if she finds someone like that, there's a good chance she won't come home again. Arietta is surprised by these words and asks Edwin what he is saying. She jokingly says that she knows she's bored with Edwin, but still asks him not to send her off so early. She smiles and adds that she can't imagine what kind of madman would want to have her as a wife. You just have to look around, and this conventional man will find beauties who are better than Arietta, in his opinion. She notes that even if she finds a gentleman, this does not guarantee her an instant wedding. She looks up at Edwin and asks him if he is not glad that she will give him some time to rest. But still, the girl asks Edwin not to relax too much, because when she comes back and sees him happy, she will be quite sad. Edwin wanted to say something, but for some reason he cut himself off in mid-sentence. At this point, the girl thinks about what will happen if she asks him to go with her to Levante. But the man tears her up, only wanting Arietta to be careful on the road. Arietta freezes for a couple of seconds, then lowers her reddened face, not understanding what she was thinking. She tells her husband that it's too early to say, but when the leaves turn red, they can meet again. At night, Edwin sits on the couch in the room that Arietta's family has given him. His mind re-emerges with memories of a man asking him to understand the king's cruelty. Edwin listens as the man continues that Edwin will do better in Filiosa because no one will know him there. Edwin thinks only that nothing will change. The only changes will be in the amount and intensity of pain, as well as in the type of humiliation. But at this moment, one bright memory appears in the man's mind. When Arietta calls the guy the greatest luck of her life, Edwin clenches his hands, repeating Arietta's words. A memory appears in the man's mind again, only in the present day, where Arietta says she can't imagine what kind of crazy man would want to marry her. Edwin holds his head with one hand and thinks that he really doesn't understand what kind of man would agree to this. But at that moment, a memory of Arietta, in all her glory, reappears in his mind. The man clenches his teeth and then, shocked, catches himself flushing. The next day begins at the warehouse where Edwin works. Arietta holds a book in her hands, but she does not look at it. She looks at Edwin with furrowed brows. Even with his back to the girl, Edwin feels her gaze on him and asks if she wanted to tell him something. Arietta denies it and stammers that she is just reading a book. Edwin asks the girl why she reads here, and Arietta says, with mock arrogance, that a true reader doesn't care about the place of reading, only the book itself. Edwin tells Arietta that she is holding the book upside down. The girl reacts to this with a slight panic, trying to return the book to its correct position as soon as possible. She tries to justify herself by saying that she knew about it and that this is how locals read books. She asks Edwin if he didn't know this. Edwin doesn't buy this lie, so he calmly responds with a denial. The girl hides her face behind a book, blushing with shame. In any case, Arietta changes the subject, drawing Edwin's attention as if to say something. Edwin looks inquisitively at the girl, who immediately offers the man her services as a barber and gives him a haircut. The man is surprised by this suggestion, remembering how only yesterday Arietta told him that there was no need to cut his hair. Still, he agrees to the proposal, giving the girl the freedom to do whatever she wants. Arietta carefully cuts off Edwin's hair and then says she's done. Edwin is surprised at how quickly she has coped with this and asks her if she is sure that she has. The girl replies that yes, she cut off exactly as much as she needed. After that, Arietta quickly leaves Edwin, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Quickly running to her room, Arietta is happy that she managed to get some of the young man's beautiful hair. She realizes that she could have asked Edwin for his hair directly, as a sign that they are going to be separated for a while. But she also realizes that she could not ask him to do so to his face. Even though she is going to Levante for 3 or 4 months, no one can guarantee that she will not stay there for a longer period of time. Arietta still can't believe that she is leaving Filiosa and leaving Edwin here alone for an unknown amount of time. She recalls that when she first met him, she respected the young man immensely, considering him perfect. But the girl admits that she was specifically mistaken in her ideas about Lord Edwin's personality. He's still incredibly handsome, but the real Edwin is much different from the image of the one Arietta met for the first time. Arietta thinks that she really wonders if Edwin's face will change if he sees a dead person in front of him. At least a little bit. Even so, there is no denying that Edwin has always cared for Arietta. Clutching the pendant with Edwin's hair, Arietta repeats his name, blushing. While the maids are loading Lady Arietta's belongings into the carriage, the younger brother and parents say goodbye to their sister and daughter, who is leaving for Levante for several months. Upset by these events, the heroine's brother asks her not to forget to write them letters. Arietta puts her hands caringly on her brother's shoulders and tells him to remember to obey his parents. I also tried to stay out of trouble. Hugo says that it will be quite easy because it will be difficult to get into trouble without his sister around. Arietta just giggles in response. The mother asks her daughter to be careful and to say hello to Aunt Lillian. Arietta tells her parents not to get sick. Before getting into the carriage, Arietta looks back. She does not see Edwin among the servants escorting her, which is why she turns her head back in disappointment and gets into the carriage anyway. While eating, she looks out the window and wonders what time it is. Mentally, she hopes they are almost there. It's only been a day, and Arietta is already tired, which is why she hopes to rest soon. At some point, the carriage stops, and the man driving it tells Arietta that they will have to spend the night here. He tells her that there's a traveler's lodge nearby, which Arietta is quite surprised to hear, not expecting such a thing. The driver says that although the house is not luxurious, it has everything they need, so they can easily spend one night there. Arietta is shocked to see that this is not the nicest house in the world, and can't believe that she will have to sleep here. The man asks Arietta to go inside as soon as possible because it is quite cold at night. As she heads for the door, Arietta hears a sound that catches her attention, but she quickly realizes that the sound is coming from the carriage's trolley. Arietta didn't bring so many things with her, and their family wasn't rich enough to do so, but for some reason, her father hired 2 porters. Arietta wonders why her father made this decision, but in the next moment, she simply decides that he had his own reasons for doing this, and that the girl shouldn't think about it. Arietta gets quite cold at night, which makes her want a cup of hot tea. Luckily for her, she remembers the fact that she had brought tea leaves from Filioque with her. Arriving at the carriage, Arietta searches for tea among her belongings for a long time, which is not very successful. But suddenly she sees the place where she put it and happily reaches out for tea. Suddenly, someone's hand is suddenly on the girl's shoulder, causing her to scream in fright. In order not to make too much noise, this man covers the girl's mouth with his palm and asks her not to scream. Arietta recognizes Edwin in the voice and then looks back at him, his hand on her face. Edwin apologizes to Arietta, realizing that he has scared her quite a bit. The girl can't believe her eyes that Edwin is in front of her and asks him how it is possible that he is here. Edwin takes off his hood, which finally confirms for Arietta that it is him. Arietta gently touches Edwin's face with her hands and pulls him close, looking at her husband's face. She lets him go after a moment and asks why he is here if he should be at Filioche's. The young man looks at her silently for a while and then replies that he will accompany her to Lavon. The girl reacts with surprise and then asks the man if he means that he will be a carrier for her. After some thought, Arietta also asks Edwin if he is here because the protagonist's father sent him here. Arietta realizes that, given the boy's tragic past, it would be better for him to avoid large places. She decides that the fact that her husband decided to go with her alone is a complete lie. The heroine is quite confused by her father's actions. She says worriedly that she doesn't understand why her father did this, even though Edwin is a slave to him. The girl says that her father should have asked Edwin's opinion before deciding such things, and to respect Edwin's attitude in this regard. She awkwardly apologizes to Edwin, feeling ashamed of her father. While apologizing on behalf of her father, Arietta adds that he doesn't usually act like this, and she really doesn't understand the reason for her father's decisions. She also says she will talk to her dad about it, so Edwin can go back to Filioque without worrying. With that, Arietta is about to go inside. But then Edwin gently grabs the girl's arm, stopping her. He says that the decision to leave Filioque to accompany Lady Arietta was his own. That is, no one forced him to do this. That's why he asks the girl not to tell him that he has to go back to Filioche. With these words, Edwin surprises Arietta, forcing her to stop talking for a while. Still, she says that people in Levant might recognize Edwin, to which he admits that he doesn't care about that. He says that there is something more important to him than that. Arietta asks Edwin what is the more important thing he is talking about. Edwin calls Arietta's name, and she takes it as a call, so she asks Edwin what he wants to say. Edwin repeats the girl's name again, but she only asks him again. A gentle smile appears on Edwin's face, and he decides to leave it at that, saying that no, it doesn't matter what he wanted to say. The next day, the protagonist finally arrives at her aunt's house. Her relatives' servants are the first to greet her. But suddenly something catches Arietta's attention, and she looks back. She sees her aunt coming toward her, happily greeting her niece on her arrival. She hugs her dear niece tightly and says that she can't believe that 2 years have passed since their last meeting. The aunt also says that Arietta has no idea how many times Lillian invited her to her house in her letters. jokingly adding that Arietta is cruel in this sense. Arietta, hugging her aunt, asks why her aunt is saying this if she is the one who promised to visit Arietta's family in Filiosa, but never came. The aunt releases Arietta from her loving embrace and, with her hands at her sides, says that the girl knows perfectly well that her aunt was being polite and would never have gone to such a remote place. Meanwhile, Arietta is catching her breath after such a tight hug. In any case, the auntie looks toward the carriers and asks the girl if the two will also stay here. The girl nervously looks back at Edwin and says yes, but only one. The aunt, in turn, asks which of them she is talking about, and Arietta points to Edwin, describing him as a young blonde boy. The auntie stares at the man thoughtfully for a while, and Arietta becomes nervous. She is afraid that her aunt might recognize the slave as Lord Edwin, which really scares her. But my aunt only says that then he will have to get a room. Luckily for them, their aunt has a few servants available in the wing with rooms. She gestures to her servant to get everything ready. Arietta sighs with relief, glad that her aunt did not recognize Edwin. She then thanks her aunt for her kindness. Levante is a city that has always been famous for its summer parties for the highest level aristocrats. Some of the capital's aristocrats even visited Levante specifically to take part in a couple of them. That's why in a couple of days, the main character will accompany her aunt to a holiday party of a familiar countess. She tells Edwin this while they are sitting on the couch in one of the rooms. Arietta, wiggling her foot, says that her aunt has a high opinion of the countess. But the real reason for Arietta's participation in this is her desire to find a husband for her through connections. Edwin says he realized that. Then he adds that it's wonderful, which leads the heroine to ask what exactly is wonderful about it. Edwin replies that if it is the countess's birthday, most of the guests will be women. Arietta does not understand him, asking for details. Edwin adds that this will be a good chance for Arietta to observe the manners and behavior of women that she can adopt in the future. Arietta is irritated by her husband's words. She mistook Edwin's words for mockery and can't believe he would say such a thing right in front of her face. Arietta gradually boils over with anger and mentally notes that she knows very well that she is far from modest. Arietta asks Edwin if he thinks she's stupid, to which he responds with incomprehension. She clenches her hands into fists and asks if the boy thinks that he might disgrace his family with his behavior. The girl mentally recalls that her husband was always unhappy with her behavior and constantly tried to teach her. Arietta tells Edwin that he has a very wrong idea about her, and she will prove him wrong. Edwin says there is no need for that, but Arietta insists that if she wants to, she will show Edwin what a perfect lady she can be. Edwin tells her that there is no need for that because Arietta is already perfect. He stuns the girl with these words. Edwin continues that in his opinion, Lady Arietta is perfect, which is why she doesn't need to prove to him what he already knows. Arietta hesitantly asks if the man is joking, given the fact that he had told her earlier. Edwin gets a little upset and says that he just needed to give the girl an excuse. But in fact, if possible, Edwin would like Lady Arietta to remain unchanged for as long as possible. He says that he wants her to never change, but he realizes that this is impossible. After these words, Edwin looks depressed. Arietta worriedly asks her husband if everything is okay. Edwin asks her to forget the last sentence. At this point, the girl's heart starts to beat faster. A group of aristocrats are having a nice conversation while drinking tea. One of the group notes that she has a wonderful son, though he worries about the absence of his future wife. Aunt Lillian says that this is a great coincidence because she has a lonely niece, and then turns to Arietta, but notices that she doesn't listen to her at all. The aunt is annoyed by this and wonders what the girl is thinking about if she is greeting in the clouds all day. Arietta recalls Edwin's words that haunt her. She allows herself to think that Edwin might like her, which makes her blush and hurry to take a sip of tea. After a while, Arietta keeps thinking about it. She comes to the conclusion that she cannot like him, because all this time he had been behaving nobly, while Arietta's nobility is still to be found. Disturbed by these thoughts, the girl walks around the room from side to side. She assumes that the reason for his behavior is that the man knows that Arietta has sympathy for him. Realizing that she cannot find the answer on her own, the heroine decisively leaves the room, deciding to ask the guy directly about his feelings. Once in the courtyard, Arietta notices her aunt's maids lively discussing something. As she gets closer, she hears them talking about Edwin, who is currently doing his own thing in the yard. One of the maids even expresses a desire to approach an attractive guy and strike up a conversation, but others dissuade her, explaining that she would only embarrass herself. As a result, all three maids agree that it is, if not the most beautiful, then one of the most beautiful they have ever seen in their lives. Arietta experiences déjà vu, realizing that this has happened before, recalling an identical situation at home. Turning her gaze to Edwin himself, she finds the man in all his glory, with his hair down and drops of water running down his skin. Arietta herself blushes at the sight, and even mentally asks Edwin to stop being so charming. Arietta puts her hands to her sides and draws the attention of all three maids with a demonstrative heave. Women are frightened by the unexpected. They stammer and ask Lady Arietta what she is doing here. Arietta, in turn, says that it seems to her that there is no work for women in this house at all. The girls apologize to her in fright, to which she adds that this is actually one of the busiest times in the house, hinting that they should leave. She also says that she can't help but assume that the maids have too little work to do when they stand there doing nothing. The maids are completely frightened and run away from Lady Arietta, returning to their work. Edwin says it was quite intimidating. He notes that at first, he even thought that this was not the Arietta he had known before. Arietta looks slightly annoyed and mentally notes that it is, in fact, his fault. Arietta asks him if he's disappointed by this, and Edwin denies it, but adds one, "but." Arietta asks him what he means by "but." Edwin smiles gently and says that he was afraid that he would get it from an angry Arietta. Arietta reacts by blushing and furrowing her brows. Arietta angrily tells Edwin to stop joking with her because she is more serious than ever. Edwin replies that he knows this, and Arietta asks why he continues to bully her. She can be scary when she's angry, so it's better for Edwin not to know. Edwin just looks at her calmly, listening to her. Arietta stops scolding Edwin and freezes for a moment. She sighs and says she can never be better than Edwin. Edwin is upset by these words, looking down guiltily. Arietta rhetorically wonders if she will be able to do this at least once in her life. But then the girl abruptly changes the subject and decisively approaches Edwin's face, saying that she wants to ask him something. But all determination disappears the moment she realizes that she doesn't know how best to ask. She even imagines a scene where she naively asks Edwin if he likes her. He reacts with coldness and disgust, asking the girl if she thinks he looks crazy. Without waiting for the question itself, the real Edwin leans toward Arietta, trying to get her attention. The heroine shyly looks away, but her eyes fall on the unbuttoned shirt, through which part of the man's torso is visible. Arietta blushes and catches herself thinking that she would be curious to know what it would be like to be in his arms. Edwin asks the girl if she is okay, to which she screams and turns away from the shocked man. In her mind, she calls herself almost crazy, not realizing what thoughts are coming to her right in front of Edwin's face. Arietta realizes that she needs to say something right now, before her husband guesses anything. She can't think of anything better than to ask why she hasn't seen him much these days. She adds that she was worried about him because of this. Mentally, she realizes that she is talking nonsense. Edwin is surprised by this question and reminds Arietta how she personally told her husband that Lady Jenner, the girl's aunt, might recognize him. That is why, according to the girl, Edwin should stay away from her. He asks Arietta if she has forgotten about it, which makes her desperate. Arietta says that this is not the problem, and she has questions for him. Edwin says he will be happy to hear this question, and is now all ears. Arietta begins to stutter, not knowing what to say. She feels like she's ready to fall underground, just to avoid being here, in the middle of this awkward conversation. A whole month has passed since Arietta arrived in Levant to visit her Aunt Lillian. During this time, she managed to attend 5 balls and about 15 small parties to which her aunt apparently took her. Each time, Aunt Lillian tried to set up her niece, Arietta, with one of the single gentlemen. Thanks to the aunt's efforts, 3 men managed to show interest in the protagonist. But none of them lasted long. For some reason, each man stopped visiting the estate after a couple of times. As the next man left, Aunt Lillian tried to find out from him what had happened and why he was leaving. The man looks around and politely says that he is sorry to say this, but Miss Jenner's niece does not seem to be interested in him. All the time they spent together, the girl was constantly thinking about something else. The man admits that he tried to strike up a conversation first, but all of Arietta's answers were rather distant. The aunt decides to find out what her niece's problem is, to which she says that she knows that all these men are wonderful people, but none of them could interest her. But the aunt firmly puts her hands on Arietta's shoulders and notes that the girl is not in a situation where she can turn her nose up. She asks her if she thinks that many couples marry for love. Arietta says that she does not want to marry a man she does not love. She adds that if she has to choose, she would rather live alone than like this. She finds her aunt in despair. Standing in the yard, Arietta leans against a tree and says that her aunt is very upset with Arietta, adding that Edwin is to blame. The man is distracted from cleaning and asks why. Arietta says that she was unable to keep her attention during the meetings, which upset the gentleman. Edwin just smiles at this. He asks Arietta what his fault is in these situations. Arietta gets a little annoyed and tells him not to run away from the obvious like that. She reminds her husband that Edwin was always interrupting the meetings. Every 5 minutes he would come up to Arietta and say that, for example, an important letter from Philios had arrived, or even that my aunt was sick. A couple of times, the man even hinted that there was something on the heroine's face, or that the knot on the girl's back had come undone. She tells Edwin that he has no idea how difficult it was for her to get herself together after that. She crosses her arms over her chest in resentment and asks Edwin to tell her what he thinks, how she should have behaved with men at such moments. Edwin continues to clean up, telling the girl that if men couldn't handle these situations, they couldn't handle Arietta herself. Arietta is embarrassed and blushes at these words. She finds Edwin's words insolent, although she admits to herself that she cannot argue with them. Still, Arietta asks if Edwin is trying to compete for attention in this way, or if he is just entertaining himself with these antics. Edwin pauses for a moment and then replies that he just doesn't want to share. The next day, something on the table catches Arietta's eye. She sees the letter and realizes that it is from her father in Filiosa. The girl sits down on the couch, opening the envelope, ready to read the news from her parents. But something in the writing makes her faint, and she drops the letter, stumbling out of her seat. She bursts into the room where Edwin was at the time and says they need to talk urgently. She shows him a folded piece of paper in her hand and says that this morning she received a letter from Philios. She asks if Edwin wants to read it, looking concerned. Edwin puts his head down and says that he thinks he already understands what the letter says. Emotionally, Arietta clutches the letter in her hand. She yells at him that it's working out. Her father didn't send Edwin to Levante. The girl says that her family is in complete disarray because they think that Edwin just ran away from them. Arietta screams and asks her husband why he did what he did. Arietta says that a person labeled as a slave cannot simply change their location. She adds that Edwin should know better than she does. Edwin, on the other hand, reacts with silence, looking down. Judging by the content of the letter, Edwin's disappearance was noticed long ago, but because of Arietta's close relationship with him, her father gathered the courage to tell Arietta about this escape. The girl undoubtedly believed all this time that Edwin had been sent by his father, recalling the man's words that day. She could have thought anything but that Edwin had simply run away. Arietta, almost crying, shouts to Edwin to say something, perhaps to explain his actions to her. She emotionally throws the crumpled paper at Edwin, which lands at his feet. Arietta holds her head in despair and says in a trembling voice that she does not understand the meaning of all this. She always thought that Edwin was responsible for his decisions and actions. She leans over and asks Edwin why he did something so stupid. Edwin cautiously reaches out to Arietta, wanting to reassure her, but still hesitates to touch her. He looks down, feeling guilty. Edwin is well aware of what they do with runaway slaves. At best, he will lose only one of his limbs, and at worst, he will lose his head and apparently his life. Edwin is well versed in the laws of the kingdom because he still considers himself the last descendant of the Redford family. As a child, he was tutored by a family member who was loyal and devoted to the kingdom. So even when the man lost everything, he obeyed the prince's order. He chose to do so, refusing the help of people who thought the whole situation was an unjust mistake. Recalling Arietta, Edwin admits that his body was moving faster than he could realize. His actions were done independently of his mind. In his thoughts, Edwin admits that after meeting Arietta, he completely forgot what it was like to be his old self. This action was the desire of Edwin himself, not his personality, honed for Redford's status. He just wanted to be closer to Arietta. In his mind, Edwin realizes that he was ready to do it, even knowing that it would cost him a lot. He would have liked to convey his thoughts to Lady Arietta, but unfortunately, he could not do so as a slave. One of the following days, Arietta notices another bouquet of flowers and notes that Edwin has been secretly leaving them for a week. Even as she leaves the room, she notices a small but beautiful purple flower left by her husband. This cannot but make her smile tenderly. Approaching Edwin, who is resting under a tree, Arietta says that the flowers will not be enough. She adds that she would like to see her husband to apologize. Smiling, Arietta says that if Edwin does something like that again, she will make a fun life for him. At this point, they are left alone together, thus finally making peace. The next day, Aunt Lillian comes to Arietta's house with the news. She is holding an invitation to a grand ball hosted by Count Shanks. In honor of this, the aunt suggests that her niece throw away all her outdated dresses and buy new ones. She says she has just made an appointment with a wonderful tailor. All a girl has to do is go to get measured. Arietta gently reminds her aunt that she is not thinking about marriage yet, so she is not very supportive of the idea. But Aunt Lillian doesn't even want to hear it. She says Arietta doesn't even realize what a great opportunity this is for her. There will be a large number of young lords at this ball, which cannot but be a plus in the woman's opinion. That is why the aunt starts pushing her niece, saying that she will be grateful to her when she grows up. After a while, Arietta finds herself in a carriage where she thinks that a custom-made dress must be quite expensive, which makes her feel uncomfortable. The coachman was about to close the door, but suddenly someone's hand holds it, and Edwin appears in the girl's field of vision, asking where she is going. Arietta is surprised, but happy to see Edwin. With an embarrassed smile, she explains that she is going to the city center because her aunt sent her to a boutique. Edwin is interested in the details of this. Arietta furrows her eyebrows a little, and then awkwardly explains that her aunt is planning to order a dress for the girl. After thinking about it for a moment, Edwin asks if he can go with Arietta, to which the girl is a little surprised. Arietta asks why he would do that and adds that Edwin would be bored there. But the young man stands his ground and says that he wants to personally assure himself that the lady will be safe. Arietta just laughs at this, saying that she is actually going to a clothing store, not to the battlefield. But noticing her husband's serious gaze, Arietta cannot help but mentally note the stubbornness of her husband, who continues to stand his ground. Nevertheless, Arietta decides to let Edwin keep her company on the way to the boutique, so she just sighs and slaps her palm on the carriage seat next to her with a smile on her face. She says that Edwin can go with her, but on the condition that he doesn't complain about being bored if he does. Edwin promises he won't and sits down next to the girl. Arietta thinks that with this behavior, Edwin is somewhat like an obedient puppy, which makes her giggle softly, covering her mouth with her hand. Once there, Arietta finishes taking her measurements and goes in search of Edwin, who has disappeared. She walks down the street, looking around for her husband. The girl recalls with a smile how Edwin, embarrassed by the sight of Arietta in her underwear, said that he would wait for her outside. Arietta jokingly reminded him that he was going to stay by her side. Arietta doesn't see Edwin around, so she assumes that he has decided to walk around the city because he hasn't been in a place like this for quite some time. She decides to wait for the guy in the carriage, but on the way to it, she accidentally runs into a girl she doesn't know. Arietta is about to apologize to the girl, but something in her makes her stop, staring into the stranger's green eyes. The stranger politely apologizes to Arietta, then smiles and nods goodbye. She walks past Arietta, returning to her direction, leaving Arietta standing behind her, blushing slightly. Arietta could have stood there for a while longer, but her attention is drawn to the coachman, who asks the lady what she is doing, standing in one place. Arietta asks the coachman if he has seen the boy who came to town with her, which lets the man know that she is looking for him. The coachman scratches the back of his head thoughtfully and says that he is not sure. The heroine tells the man that she will look for him herself, noting that he shouldn't be far away. As she continues her search, Arietta recalls the stranger, wondering in her mind who she is. She confesses to herself that this girl looked simply irresistible. A little upset, Arietta adds in her mind that even Edwin himself would not have been able to resist falling in love with someone like her. As Arietta walks down the street, she thinks that the mere thought that Edwin might look at such a beautiful woman irritates her. She cuts herself off at this thought and lightly claps both hands on her cheeks, deciding that she needs to stop thinking about it and get herself together. Still not finding her husband, Arietta starts to get a little worried, thinking about where her Edwin could have gone. But suddenly, her attention is drawn again to the strange lady they had seen a few minutes earlier. The girl looks like she is looking for something or someone. This leads the protagonist to assume that the strange lady has also lost someone. As Arietta watches the girl step out into the middle of the street, she thinks that it is dangerous to stand in the middle of the street like that. At this very moment, the hoofbeats of a horse can be heard, and the messenger rides on top of it, shouting warnings to people on his way to move away. But the strange girl is clearly not up to it, which is why she simply does not notice the horse rushing right at her. Arietta realizes that she has to act, so without hesitation, she jumps out onto the road in front of the girl and pushes her to the side, wanting to save her from a collision with the animal. But both girls are unable to stand on their feet, and they simply fall to the ground. Arietta gets a little more, but she is still the first to get up, yelping in pain from the fall. The stranger, worried that Arietta fell because of her, apologizes, regretting that the girl and her dress were damaged. Arietta reassures the girl that everything is fine, but mentally notes that she hadn't even thought about it before jumping in to save the stranger. Arietta politely helps the stranger to stand up, asking her if she has hurt herself or is in any pain. The unidentified lady says that Arietta saved her from disaster. She didn't even think before standing in the middle of the road like that. The girl bows to the main character, expressing her gratitude for her rescue. Arietta tells her not to worry about it, and then wonders if the unknown lady was looking for someone, so distracted from the road. The lady mysteriously replies that she had been dreaming of meeting someone for so long, but she probably thought she saw this person in the crowd. Arietta asks if this means that she was looking for a person, to which the lady only remains sadly silent, turning her head to the side. Arietta catches herself thinking that she has a bad feeling about this, and mentally wonders who this mysterious lady was looking for. Speaking of manners, the lady introduces herself as Viviana Antoine Richcanel. Arietta introduces herself by her first name, and then realizes that the name Richcanel sounds quite familiar. Viviana repeats the main character's name in shock, Mackenzie. She asks if she is the same Mackenzie as the one from Philios. Equally surprised, Arietta asks Viviana how she knows, realizing that few people are familiar with her area. But at that moment, she is distracted by a man grabbing her arm. The heroine looks back and sees an excited Edwin. The man puts his hands on the girl's shoulders and excitedly asks her where she was, why all her clothes are dirty, and adds that he couldn't find her when he returned to the boutique, so he went looking for her. But at this point, he is interrupted by Viviana, who recognizes the man as Lord Edwin. She shockingly calls the guy by his title, not believing her eyes. This makes both Arietta and Edwin look back at the lady. Unexpectedly, the former lord also recognizes the girl, surprised to call her by her first name. After that, Viviana immediately throws herself into her husband's arms, saying that she missed him incredibly. With tears in her eyes, Lady Viviana says that he has no idea how much she has missed Edwin. Arietta freezes, watching this scene in shock. At some point, she lowers her gaze. The girl realizes that she has finally remembered where she heard Lady Viviana's name. She recalls that before Edwin's arrival in Filioce as a slave, the man was married to Viviana. This mixes Arietta with the final change in her face. She nervously turns away from the two of them, wanting to leave. Edwin notices this and slightly pushes Lady Viviana away from him. He asks Arietta to stop, not realizing where she is going. He approaches the girl, who is bent over, shocked by these events. The man reaches out to Arietta, but notices how much the girl is trembling at this moment. This makes Edwin stand still for a while, confused by the girl's reaction. At this point, Arietta pulls herself together and decisively leaves. Already sitting in the carriage, Arietta stares blankly out the window. At this time, Edwin is sitting across from her, looking at the girl with concern. He lowers his head, thinking of Lady Viviana at this moment. He recalls his acquaintance with Lady Viviana. In these memoirs, the girl is happy to meet him, but still wonders why Edwin came to her, realizing that it was not just for fun. Lord Edwin looks away, thinking for a moment. He recalls a conversation with a man who talks about the Marquis of Rishkanel, who has a beautiful daughter. The man notes that he considers the lady to be almost the most beautiful girl in the whole kingdom. He also adds, referring to Lord Edwin, that she resembles him in some way, perhaps in some way like an aura. He cannot give an exact answer. Edwin is not very interested in this, but still keeps the conversation going by answering this information in a single sentence. Lord Edwin's father interrupts the conversation, confirming his husband's words and saying that Lady Viviana is indeed an extraordinary girl. The father recalls that such a girl always has a lot of gentlemen, but for some reason, she has been refusing each of them for a long time. The father has an idea and suggests that his son Edwin meet Lady Vivian if he has no other women in mind. Edwin immediately calmly agrees to his father's proposal. Returning from his memories, Edwin mentally confirms the man's words about Lady Viviana's resemblance to him. They are indeed very similar, especially in that they put family before themselves. Without further ado, Lord Edwin gets down on one knee in front of the girl and says that he has come to propose marriage to her. Lady Viviana looks at the man for a while and then says that she is honored. At this point, Edwin politely kisses the hand of the girl in front of him. In his mind, he notes that he proposed to a girl he had never met before because of her noble character and pride. She is the perfect candidate for the role of Duchess of Radford. Most likely, Viviana made her decision in the same way by making a calculation. But shortly after the pause, Edwin was sent to the border of the kingdom by order of the king. A year later, he ceased to be Redford, which meant the loss of his status and the abolition of the powwow. Coming back from his thoughts, Edwin wonders if the relationship between Viviana and him was not purely mutually beneficial. The next day, Edwin meets Lady Arietta in the courtyard and says he wants to talk to her. But Arietta refuses him, saying that they will talk later. She justifies this by saying that she is too tired for any kind of conversation right now. Without letting the man say anything else, Arietta hurries to leave the area next to him. Edwin mentally notes that it has been a day since their trip to the city, and Lady Arietta has been avoiding speaking to her husband ever since. Not only conversations, but also meetings, because when she notices Edwin on her way, she immediately runs away or changes her path. Edwin realizes with alarm that all this behavior is caused by Lady Viviana and the events of that day. He recalls the times and days when he and Arietta laughed happily while spending time together. Now those days seem so far away for him. Edwin realizes that Arietta has given his heart warmth, and he has finally begun to appreciate this warmth. But he worries whether Lady Arietta has become tired of him. He puts his hand on his chest and wonders if the girl really wants to return everything to the way it was before, becoming strangers to each other. In the evening of that day, Arietta puts down her book and yawns, and then decides that it is time for her to go to bed. But suddenly, a knock on the door catches her attention, and she asks, "Who is it?" in surprise. Arietta receives no answer, and she wonders who could have come to see her at such a late hour. She asks again about the person behind the door, but receives no answer but silence. The girl picks up the candle and decides that it is a maid named Heather. The girl recalls hearing about the old maid's poor hearing. Opening the door with a creak, Arietta sees a familiar silhouette in front of her, belonging to none other than Edwin. Edwin opens the door wider, or surprises Arietta by not realizing what he is doing outside her room so late. Edwin asks, upset, if Lady Arietta is upset that it is Edwin and not the maid named Heather who is at the door. Without waiting for an answer, Edwin says that he thinks there would have been problems if it wasn't him. With these words, he opens the door to Arietta's room completely. Arietta says that she did not allow Edwin to enter the room and tells him to leave, while the man does not listen to her, only approaching her. Edwin apologizes, but says he has to turn the girl away because he thinks they need to talk. He says they need to talk about the day they met Vivian. Thinking of this lady, Arietta gets a chill. Arietta shakes her head and says that she doesn't want to talk about it now and suggests that we postpone the conversation until later. Edwin is not satisfied with this, and he only asks what she means by later. Arietta asks her husband why he is having this conversation, and he says that it is very important to him. He continues that he wanted to wait until she came to him first, to which Arietta says that he should wait some more. But Edwin only takes one more step toward Arietta and decisively replies that this is no longer possible because he is tired of enduring. Arietta pulls away from him and tells him not to come any closer to her than he already is. Edwin asks her if she is afraid that he will hurt her. He adds that he may have gone completely insane, but even so, he would not have allowed himself to harm Arietta. Arietta takes a few more steps back and says that this is not like Edwin's usual behavior. Her back is against the wall, and she realizes that she has nowhere else to go. Edwin replies that as he said, he had run out of patience. Arietta closes her eyes, dropping the dying candle as she falls. She does not understand what is happening and just stands there for a while. But realizing that nothing is happening, she opens her eyes and, to her surprise, sees Edwin on one knee, bowing to her. She calls him by name, and Edwin tells her that she can hit him or call someone for help if she wants. But at the cost of this, Edwin asks Arietta to listen to him, to which the girl is very surprised. He tells Lady Arietta that there has never been anything between him and Viviana, and that there never could be. He adds that although they had prepared for marriage in the past, it was only for the benefit of their families. He puts his fist on his knee and swears to Arietta that there were no feelings between them. Edwin also adds that this was before he met Arietta, which makes his cheeks blush slightly. He confesses to Arietta that even on that day he never paid attention to Lady Viviana because his attention was occupied only by Lady Arietta. Arietta kneels down and sits down across from Edwin, asking why he is telling her this. She adds that it looks like Edwin is trying to justify himself to the girl. Edwin smiles at this and looks away and says that he is. Edwin says he doesn't want Arietta to hate him. At these words, Arietta freezes for a moment. Lowering her head, the girl says she doesn't know how she could hate Edwin. She covers her face with her hands and says that as Edwin said, he did nothing wrong, so she simply has nothing to hold a grudge against him. After these words, Arietta confesses to Edwin that she has not been avoiding their meetings because of Edwin. She realizes with concern that she was simply afraid of herself. She tells Edwin that if he had only known the girl's thoughts that day, he would have hated her himself. Arietta recalls how, when she came home, she walked around the room in frustration, clenching her hands into fists. She wondered if Edwin was still in love with Lady Viviana, whom she had finally seen that day. She asks herself with horror that if this is true, what will she do if Edwin does not want to go back to Philiotia? What if he wants to stay with Viviana? She dismisses these thoughts, shaking her head and telling herself that even if he wanted to, he would not be able to do it. That's because it is now owned by none other than Arietta Mackenzie's family. Arietta realizes that it doesn't matter what Edwin wants there. She can deprive him of his freedom at any time and force him to be with her. The girl gets furious and says that she doesn't care what other people think about it. But at this moment, Arietta notices herself in the reflection. She sees her face, full of anger, in the mirror. This causes Arietta to be terribly frightened and change in her face. She falls to her knees, tilting her head down. The girl is horrified to realize what she has become. She realizes that this is exactly what other bad people from his past wanted to do to Edwin. Having said this, Arietta folded her hands in her lap awkwardly and looked down, silently waiting for Edwin's reaction of condemnation. Arietta admits to herself that she wanted to keep these thoughts a secret, but realized that she had to be honest with her husband. Tears begin to drip from her eyes because she is afraid that now Edwin will no longer want to communicate with her because of these thoughts. But Edwin only gently touches the girl's hand and asks her to look at him. Arietta looks up at Edwin, who tells the girl that she has done nothing wrong and has nothing to apologize to him for. But the heroine stops him, asking the man if he didn't realize that Arietta wanted to restrict Edwin's freedom. Tears stream down her eyes, and she says that she used to hate the people who did such terrible things to Edwin with all her heart and soul. But now it turns out that she herself is no different from them. In response, Edwin tells Arietta that she can lock him up and start abusing him. Arietta looks up at her husband, who adds that he doesn't mind if she does it. Arietta does not understand what he is saying, but looking at her husband's determined face, she realizes that he is serious. After these words, Edwin reaches out to Arietta's hand, gently taking it. Having done so, the man without hesitation kisses her hand, calling her his lady. He tells her that he recognizes Lady Arietta as his only mistress. He asks the girl to never doubt this and asks her to use her power over him as she wishes. Later, Arietta learns that this is the oath a knight makes to his master. Although at that moment she could not understand exactly the meaning of this action, she understood the emotions that Edwin put into it. The next day, a servant comes to see Aunt Lillian drinking tea. He says he brought her seasonal invitations to balls. Out of all the invitations, only one catches her attention. When she opens the envelope, her aunt is shocked by the contents of the letter. After that, her aunt calls Arietta to tell her the news. Later, Arietta, holding the invitation in her hands, tells Edwin that she is invited to a masquerade ball the following week, which is being organized by the Rishkanels themselves. Edwin asks the girl why she was invited, not understanding. Arietta says that Aunt Lillian was also interested in this question. She notes that not every aristocrat can get to such a ball, and even connections won't help. As she drains the glass of water, Arietta says that it was most likely the work of the Marquis Rishkanel's daughter, who wanted to thank Arietta for saving her life. But if that is not the reason, Arietta realizes that there is only one person in this house that Lady Viviana would want to see. She tells Edwin about it. The man replies to Arietta that he has already said that he has no feelings for Lady Viviana. Arietta sighs and says that she understands that Edwin feels nothing for Lady Viviana. But she says that this invitation was not the only letter Lady Viviana sent to Arietta. She wrote it personally. She says she could not bring the letter here, warning herself that it would not fall into the wrong hands. She adds that Lady Viviana also asked that the letter be burned after Arietta would have read it. But apparently, Edwin is not particularly interested in this, so the man continues to go about his business. Arietta asks if Edwin is interested in what Vivian wrote in this second letter. To this, Edwin asks if Edwin should know about it. Arietta hesitantly says that she thinks he should. Edwin then asks if there is anything in this letter that refers to any danger that Arietta might be in. The girl is surprised by this question, but still answers that no, the letter does not say anything like that. Based on this, Edwin replies that he is not interested in the content of the letter, and it does not meet his interests. But this does not calm Arietta down, and she gets up from the table and says that the letter was about something important. She sincerely asks Edwin if he doesn't want to know what Viviana wanted to tell him in this letter. Edwin replies that the letter was not addressed to him, which is why it is not his business. Moreover, her husband completely trusts Arietta in this matter. Arietta is silent for a moment, wondering if she should continue this conversation. Nevertheless, she gathers her courage and says that Lady Viviana wishes to meet Lord Edwin. The girl adds that the invitation was an excuse for Edwin to meet Lady Viviana. The man is not very happy about this information. Edwin says that he didn't need to hear that and is about to leave, but Arietta stops him and says that she thinks Edwin should meet with the Marquise of Rishkanel. She adds that Edwin and the girl had no time or opportunity for a normal conversation. Arietta wanted to continue her thought, but Edwin stops her, calling her by name. He asks Arietta if she thinks he should meet Lady Viviana. Edwin also reminds the girl that she was uncomfortable when Edwin and Viviana met the last time. He asks Arietta if she has changed her mind about this. Arietta stammeringly admits that no, it's not true. She hasn't changed her mind. After that, Edwin says that he doesn't want to create any misunderstandings between him and Arietta, so he will pretend that he didn't hear anything. He continues that if that's all Arietta had to say, then he has to go. But Arietta stops him and confesses that Lady Viviana thinks what happened to the Redford family was an unjust mistake. It works, and Edwin stops, shocked by this information. The girl continues that the whole incident with the Redford family seems very strange to Lady Viviana. As she wrote in her letter, she says that Lady Viviana mentioned the Count who started the uprising. Lady noted that he was executed a month after his arrest. What is surprising is that Edwin's father was executed only 3 days after he was detained, although he never organized an uprising. Arietta says that even she finds it all too strange. The girl has a feeling that someone is trying to hide some secret in this case. Arietta adds that there is something terrible behind this, to which Edwin looks back at her with a look that shows no interest in it. Arietta is surprised that Edwin is not at all interested in what she has just said. She asks her husband what he thinks of everything she has just said. Doesn't that sound suspicious to him? Edwin sighs and says that, to be honest, he's not sure about that now. Arietta asks what he means, and the man says that he has also noticed some strange things about what happened to him in the past. He adds that the victims were not even given a chance to explain and justify themselves before all their property was destroyed. It looked like they were really trying to erase the Redford family from history. Edwin sighs and says that all this is in the past, and besides, it was all the king's decision. Mentally, Arietta recalls that she had always heard that the Redford family was loyal to the king. So Arietta has no idea why this is happening. But looking at Edwin, it doesn't look like he's lying to Arietta. Arietta gets ready and says that she can't let it go in the way it is now. She adds that Lady Viviana must know something, so she asks Edwin to talk to her. Edwin looks at Arietta and asks if his lady is ordering him to do this. Arietta pauses for a moment and then replies that no is a request. Arriving at the mansion where the ball was planned, Arietta gets out of the carriage and asks Edwin if he has finished getting ready. She says that the coachman will be back soon because he walks quite fast. Edwin replies that he is almost done, to which Arietta thinks she should have been better prepared. While Arietta trusted her servants, Edwin had to get ready on his own, due to lack of time. Arietta believes that even Edwin would not want to look untidy in front of his ex-fiancée, but still his fiancée. Arietta clings to the carriage and says pitifully that if the mirror in the carriage is too small for Edwin, Arietta is ready to help him dress. Edwin thanks her for the offer, but refuses, saying that he has already finished. Dressed in expensive clothes, he leaves the carriage and asks Arietta if he looks okay. Arietta blushes at the sight of Edwin and mentally says that she had forgotten how charming a man can look. Arietta replies that Edwin's appearance took her breath away. The man asks if he looks strange to a girl. Arietta denies this and says that he looks simply adorable, so much so that she has no words for it. She also adds that he looks much better than she does, although she has killed half a day getting ready, while Edwin only quickly changed in the carriage. Edwin says that Arietta is exaggerating and then asks if Arietta likes him in these clothes. Arietta confirms this fact unequivocally, clenching her fists in fascination. She adds that any lady would have blushed at the sight of Edwin. The man corrects himself and says that he meant whether Arietta personally likes his appearance. The girl is surprised because she doesn't really understand what the big difference is for Edwin. But still, Arietta smiles and confidently answers Edwin that yes, she likes his appearance. Edwin replies that he is happy to hear this while he puts on his masquerade mask. He offers the girl to take his hand and says that it's time for them to go inside. Arietta smiles happily and takes her husband's hand, after which they head to the building where the ball will be held. As Arietta walks on, she is enchanted by the magnificent view and is no longer sure whether they are in a country estate or a real castle. One of the servants in this mansion approaches the heroine and politely offers her a glass of champagne, to which Arietta agrees and takes the glass. She takes 2 glasses, offering the second one to Edwin, to which he immediately refuses, saying that he is not thirsty. In her mind, Arietta realizes that this is because Edwin wants to be completely sober before talking to Lady Viviana. The heroine unties her masquerade mask to make it easier for her to drink. Having tasted the champagne, Arietta is fascinated and says that it is delicious, realizing that only first-class alcohol is served at a ball of such rich people. Edwin notices someone approaching Arietta, so he stands in front of her, covering her with his arm. But it turns out that they have been approached by the butler of the estate, who informs them that Lady Viviana wishes to see Lady Arietta at her place because she wants to talk to her. Realizing this, Arietta and Edwin head to the room where Lady Viviana is, to which she greets them and says she is glad to see them. Arietta mentally notes how beautiful Lady Viviana is today. The young Marquess addresses Lord Edwin, saying that it must have been a difficult decision for him to come here. Edwin immediately points out that he is only accompanying Arietta, and adds that he is no longer part of the noble Redford family, so there is no point in Lady Vivian continuing to address her husband by his title. Lady Viviana says that she will, of course, be careful in the presence of other people, but not in this room. She justifies her respect by saying that she and Edwin were engaged for a short time. Getting down to business, Arietta asks Lady Viviana if she can tell them more about the information she has about the Redford family. The young Marquise smiles and agrees to this, but before doing so, asks Arietta if she could leave the room. Arietta is a little confused by this question, but Edwin immediately stands up for the girl and says that he has nothing to hide from his Lady Arietta. He adds that if Arietta can't be here, this conversation is not that important. Lady Viviana immediately says that she meant no harm and is doing this for the girl's own safety. She does not want to involve Arietta in this because it is a serious matter involving the most serious and influential people in this kingdom. The girl also adds that if someone finds out about their conversation, she is even afraid to imagine what consequences Lady Arietta might face. Lady Arietta puts her hand to her chest and says that she doesn't care at all and is willing to take the risk only to help Lord Edwin. Lady Viviana notes that she understands the girl's feelings, but if she were one of her people, she would never allow the girl to learn any more information about the case. She adds that sometimes not knowing is a much better option. She turns to Lord Edwin and says that the decision should be left to him. Edwin is nervous, but mentally notes that it is not as if Lady Viviana would lie to him now. There must be a reason why Arietta is not allowed to know this. He faces a decision that will determine the safety of his lady. But Arietta is ahead of any decisions and says that she agrees to leave the room on her own. Edwin tries to stop her, saying that if she goes, he goes too. But Arietta assures him that everything is fine. She takes his hands and tells him that she will wait for him and let him talk for as long as it takes. After these words, the girl leaves the room, leaving Edwin and Lady Viviana alone. At the beginning of the conversation, Lady Viviana asks Edwin to take off his masquerade mask, and he immediately obeys her request. She looks at him with a smile and says that now they have finally met. Despite all the events, the Edwin she knew is standing in front of her now. the one who always kept his distance, even from the closest people. Lady Viviana says she can't believe they've met. She believed, or rather was sure, that they would never be able to meet again. With all due respect to Lady Viviana, Edwin asks her to get to the point because he doesn't have much time. Sitting on her throne, Lady Viviana asks Lord Edwin if this has anything to do with his desire to return to Lady Arietta as soon as possible. She remarks that Lady Arietta must be a charming person if Edwin is trying so hard to protect her. Edwin replies that this is because Lady Arietta is still quite naive. He adds that she still doesn't really realize that helping a slave could turn out badly for her. Lady Viviana asks Lord Edwin if he is so sure, mentally noting that this is not the same Edwin she knew before. She can't help but notice how emotional Lord Edwin is right now. She mentally swears that she doesn't even know the man. Gathering her thoughts, Lady Viviana begins her story. After a while, she finishes and adds that how Lord Edwin uses this information is entirely up to him. Edwin suggests that this information was not easy to obtain. Edwin asks Lady Viviana why she decided to help him. The lady replies that she has her own personal reasons for doing so, and one of them is the desire to say goodbye to the person to whom she was engaged in the past. Rising from the table, Lady Viviana says that Lord Edwin can go, because the girl needs to return to the ballroom before anyone notices her absence. Finally, she asks her husband if Lady Arietta holds a special place in his heart. Edwin tells Vivian that no, he doesn't, and then leaves the room. Lady Viviana notes that she hadn't realized it before, but Lord Edwin turns out to be a terrible liar. Meanwhile, Arietta stands in the hall waiting for Edwin. Mentally, she admits that she may have acted selfishly in forcing her husband to come here. She recalls that Edwin did not look happy when she told him about the clue she had found. She also thinks about Lady Viviana's words, that it is better for Arietta not to know much about the situation. Recalling Edwin's words about the king, Arietta thinks that she is really interested in finding out what kind of king he is, how he could make Edwin reject his humanity. She realizes that no matter what, if they don't fight, Edwin will spend the rest of his life as a slave. Arietta allows herself to think that Lord Edwin may withdraw from her once everything is in place, but decides that she needs to distract herself from these thoughts and go get more champagne. A man who looks rich comes out from behind the curtain at the entrance to the balcony. He adjusts his belt on his pants and tells someone to come get him. Without noticing each other, Arietta accidentally runs into this man. Because of this carelessness, Arietta loses her footing and falls to the floor. Instead of helping the lady up, the man arrogantly adjusts his jacket and rudely asks Arietta why the hell she wasn't looking where she was going. At this noise, a young lady runs out and approaches the man, calling him Sean and asking if he is okay. Sean warns the woman that everyone is watching them, so she should be more careful. The lady asks Sean if it's that important, given that everyone already knows about their relationship. Sean replies that even with this in mind, they still need to avoid public embarrassment, at least until the official wedding. The lady leans over to Sean and whispers to her husband about Lady Arietta falling, hinting that he should do something about the situation. Sean just scoffs and says that the girl doesn't look familiar, which means only two things. Either she's not from the region or she comes from an unremarkable family. Arietta is surprised by this impudence, but at this moment realizes that she cannot find her mask. Sean mockingly waves his mask in front of her, asking if this is what she is looking for. Arietta screams at him to give her the mask, and he replies that he will. But the next moment, he roughly pulls her toward him, saying that she should first get up, since everyone around her is already staring. Sean tells the heroine that both of them are to blame for this situation, because neither of them was looking where they were going. Arietta, angry that the man did not even apologize to her, pulls her hand out of the man's grip and says that this would not have happened if the gentleman had been looking anywhere but at the sides. She also adds that when a person falls, the perpetrator should first check the person and help them up, rather than immediately checking their clothes. The man mockingly replies that his clothes, unlike the girl's, are very expensive. This makes Arietta very angry, to which she replies that she now understands everything. The man disinterestedly asks her what she means. With a confident smile, Arietta says that until that moment, she was sure that a person wears clothes. But when she saw this man, she realized that his clothes wear him, not the other way around. This is the reason for such arrogance. Sean smiles evilly, telling the girl to watch what she says because she has no idea who the man in front of her is. Arietta replies that she is not interested. More importantly, the man had not buttoned his shirt properly, judging by the fact that it is buttoned incorrectly from the middle to the very end. Arietta guesses what he and his passion were doing on the balcony. Despite the expensive clothes, the man did not waste his time reassuring himself that he had put them on correctly. At such words, Sean's passion visibly blushes, feeling humiliated by Arietta's words. Sean is also not satisfied with these words, and he breaks down in a scream and swings at Arietta, preparing to hit her. Arietta closes her eyes in fright. But Edwin appears and intercepts Sean's hand, preventing him from hitting his lady. Sean tries to break free, asking Edwin who he is. But to his misfortune, the man only squeezes Sean's hand harder until it hurts. After that, Edwin pushes him against the wall, despite Lady Arietta's request to let him go. Sean stares at Edwin's face in bewilderment, trying to figure out what kind of monster is trying so hard to hold him back. In the man's eyes, Sean recognizes someone he knows. Already standing on the street, Arietta tries to steady her breathing, but she is already starting to scold Edwin, warning him that if he were not wearing the mask, someone might recognize him. Edwin is only irritated by these words, and tearing his mask off his face, shouting, asks Arietta what these people would do if they recognized him. Arietta tries to calm Edwin down and says that someone might notice him now. Edwin says that he doesn't care about that and then touches Arietta's face caringly, asking her if she's okay. Arietta gently pushes him away, blushing slightly, and says that she is not the main problem here. Edwin says he could not stand by and let the man hit Arietta. The lady shouts back at him that a couple of blows will not be fatal for her. At these words, Edwin bursts into tears, not understanding how the girl could say such a thing. How can she disregard her safety like that, saying that a couple of blows won't kill her? Arietta says this is not what she meant by these words. If someone recognized Lord Edwin in the man, he would have been in huge trouble. Trembling, Arietta says that they could have beaten her husband, left him with limbs, or even killed him. Edwin replies that he doesn't care, and that if someone wants to harm Arietta, he will strangle them, not caring who that person is. Arietta puts her hands over Edwin's mouth, reassuring him that next time she will be more careful in her actions. She also shouts to him that she is worried that someone might hear them. But when she looks up at Edwin, she notices his surprise. She sighs tiredly, then looks up again at Edwin, who looks beautiful in the moonlight. Arietta thinks that when she first met Edwin, she thought he was a cold man, but looking at his reaction, she realizes that she was wrong. The fact that she is the cause of this emotionality makes Arietta blush. Looking at her husband, Arietta lowers her hands from his face and, standing on her toes, reaches out to him, wanting to kiss him. Edwin is surprised and blushes out of surprise, but the very next moment, he leans down to the girl's face, wanting to kiss her. But they are frightened by a bird that suddenly flies by, distracting the couple from the kiss. Arietta blushes, abruptly realizing that she had tried to kiss Edwin without thinking about it. Edwin would like to ask Arietta something, but they are suddenly distracted by a servant who informs Arietta that Lady Viviana advises them to leave as soon as possible. Arietta is surprised by this, to which the servant adds that his lady also advised Arietta to stay away from here. He explains this by saying that one of its distinguished guests started smashing up the building in anger. That's why Arietta should leave this place to avoid getting into trouble. Arietta tells Edwin that they must return as soon as possible, to which Edwin obediently agrees with the girl. In the carriage, Arietta is already concerned about this situation. Edwin received information from Lady Arietta, but this unknown man almost ruined all their plans. Nevertheless, she tries to distract herself from these thoughts, deciding that she will never see this conflicted man again. At this thought, she smiles at Edwin, who has been sitting across from her all this time. The next day, her aunt waves her fan excitedly and mentally remarks that she had always hoped that Arietta would find a rich husband. But Duke Rovani himself was not part of the plans. My aunt recalls that first there was an invitation from Rishkanel, and now the visit of such a famous person was not long in coming. My aunt wonders why there is such an influx of famous people. Arietta sits on the couch, saying nothing. Suddenly, she irritably asks the guest how he knew where she lived. Sean, the man with whom Arietta had a conflict, replies that it was very easy for him. He puts his foot down and adds that this is not the only thing he has learned. Now he knows many things about the main character. Arietta is not happy to hear the news and calls Sean incredibly arrogant. She reminds her husband that he tried to hit her a couple of days ago. Has he forgotten about it? Sean replies that she deserved it. He was very drunk, but still. Arietta is angry that her husband is not even going to admit his mistake. Sean calls the heroine capricious, then snorts and says that his presence should be an honor for her. He's not the kind of person who pays attention to the daughters of some ordinary aristocrats. Arietta crosses her arms over her chest and asks Sean why he shouldn't leave her alone if she's so easy for him. At this, the man smiles eerily, baring his teeth, and says that the girl's offer sounds tempting, but she has something he needs. Arietta pretends not to understand what the man is talking about, but he tells her not to play dumb and declares that he knows everything. He asks Arietta about the bastard who strangled him yesterday. Arietta is frightened, but realizes that she has to keep her cool and hide Edwin's presence in the house at all costs. She tells her husband that she doesn't know the guy. It was a random gentleman who decided to defend. She mocks Sean, asking if he really came here just to get back at that guy. The man sighs and sarcastically asks her if she really doesn't know him. At this point, Arietta would have thought it had worked, but then Sean starts laughing evilly and tells her not to take him for a fool. He gives Edwin's full name, Edwin Benedict de Vere Redford. He mockingly asks the girl if she recognizes the name. Arietta is horrified to realize that she doesn't know how, but this man knows Edwin. She stammers and asks Sean how he knows Edwin. Sean says that he can see right through Arietta and calls her boring. He says that if she does not tell him everything, he will have to use other methods. With that, he rolls up his sleeve. Anyway, Sean shrugs and says it's quite interesting that the arrogant Lord Redford is now a slave to someone like Arietta. He admits that he hardly recognized the former lord. Arietta yells at Sean that she is not Edwin's mistress. When he says this, Sean tells him not to tell from Edwin's behavior that he is denying his affiliation with Arietta. He recalls that it has been a year since Edwin was in Filioque. His disappearance then turned the whole capital upside down because everyone wanted such a slave. Everyone believed that he had escaped, but his then owner did not agree to provide any information on this matter. And the young countess fell ill. She was happy to have her cherished lover as a slave, but in the end, she stayed with her husband. And the count still doesn't know what happened to his wife. Sean says that only a real fool would lose control of his wife. Remembering Lady Viviana, Sean whispers that maybe he's just as foolish. The next moment, he clenches his hands into a fist and shouts at Arietta to find out where Edwin is. Arietta gets up and begs Sean to calm down. She apologizes to him and begs him to remember the old friendship between him and Edwin. Sean angrily punches the wall when he hears that the girl mistook him and Edwin for old friends. He orders the girl to listen as carefully as possible and says that he is sick of this Redford bastard. He even admits that he hates him. Sean says that if the girl thinks he feels sorry for Edwin, she is very much mistaken. He says that he has never felt so free, and if he had the opportunity, he would have branded Edwin a slave with his own hands. In addition, Sean recalls that Edwin left Filiosa on his own. He asks if the heroine's father hasn't noticed this. Arietta is completely horrified by what she has heard, sincerely not understanding how this man has all this information. Sean angrily recalls that something terrible happened to the last slave who escaped from his owners. He was deprived of a pair of limbs, after which he was killed by wild animals. Arietta screams, realizing that although this Sean is a bastard, he is the heir to the Duke's fortune, and with his power, he is quite capable of harming Edwin. Arietta begins to cry and folds her arms and makes a begging gesture, then kneels down and begs Sean not to harm her Edwin. She promises to do whatever he wants in return. At this point, Edwin bursts into the room, to which Sean smiles evilly and comments that he took too long. He asks Edwin if he should address the man with a slave number. Edwin calls Sean by the title Lord. He smiles and walks over to Edwin. Without ceremony in front of the guy, Sean punches him in the face, calling him a slave. Arietta stands up for Edwin, blocking him with herself. She asks Sean what he's doing. Sean replies that the slave had just called the nobleman just a lord, and the man was lucky that he forgave him so easily. Tears drip from Arietta's eyes, and she tells Sean that he is the worst person in her life. Sean continues with a creepy look that Edwin should be grateful that the nobleman didn't cut out his tongue, although he adds that he is capable of changing his mind. At this time, Edwin gets up, blood dripping from his face from the wound. Sean says that life is ironic. Who would have ever thought that a respected nobleman would one day become an ordinary slave? Sean recalls how his father constantly compared him to Edwin when talking about his next promotion to the military rank of lord. He also recalls his beloved Lady Viviana, who told him about her engagement to Lord Edwin. Sean's heart was broken. He couldn't believe that after all the years he had spent giving everything to her, she had just gotten engaged to someone else. Viviana only says that soon Sean will find the right lady for him. One day, Sean got drunk at a small celebration in honor of Edwin and Vivian's successful engagement. Everyone around him congratulated Edwin, wondering how he managed to get the girl to agree to it if she had always refused everyone. But they are a bit surprised when Edwin replies that the only reason they are engaged is because of the benefits their marriage will bring to both families. But one of the men continues that Lord Edwin must be happy that his bride is so beautiful. Lord Edwin, on the other hand, is not sure, so he answers that he does not know. Sean is incredibly angry at the disrespect for Lady Viviana on the part of Lord Edwin, who managed to take her away from him so easily. He is about to leave, but he can't keep his feet on the ground and accidentally falls to the ground. Sean feels uncomfortable, and Lord Edwin only makes the situation worse by telling him that he should go home because he has already had too much to drink tonight. He says that in this state, Sean will only cause problems for others. Sean comes back from his flashbacks with words that he screams that despite how arrogant Edwin has always been, he is now just a slave. He mockingly asks Edwin if he can continue to maintain his pride, and then rudely pulls Arietta out of the way, telling her not to get in his way. Edwin tells Sean to stop and then grabs the man's arm. He changes his tone to a more respectful one so as not to make the man even angrier than he already is. Edwin asks Sean to leave Arietta alone.